Hi everyone, it's Josie from OPWDD. Before we get started, I just wanted to explain that today we are offering closed captioning for anyone who may need the service. If you look at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, there's a box called the Multimedia Viewer. You want to click on that, and if you scroll down inside that little box, there'll be a blue box warning you about an external link. You want to click that, and once you do, you're going to see the text start scrolling. If you go to inside the Multimedia Viewer, there is a dialog box where you can change the font size, the color, the type of font to make it easier for you to read. And with that, I'll kick it off.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the March 25th, 2022 meeting of the Developmental Disabilities Advisory Council. It's our first meeting of 2022, and we're very excited to have everybody together. Because it's been a while since we've met, we have a pretty full agenda today. So we will get started. First, I'd like to welcome Commissioner Neufeld. Commissioner, welcome and congratulations on your confirmation. We're very excited to have you with us today and participating in the DDAC.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. We're all excited to be here. I've been anxiously awaiting my first DDAC meeting, so there it is.
Very good. Josie, can we pull up an agenda? Do you have the ability to share the agenda?
I don't think I have it loaded, but if you give me a second, I can.
Just want to quickly go over what you can expect today. We're going to start because we have many new members and it has been a while since we have met. The executive committee has been working and with the help of Michelle put together a very thoughtful presentation to kind of summarize and introduce who we are, what our purpose is, outline some of our how we actually work as a council. So Michelle is going to go over that. We'll then move to committee reports, and we do have a couple of the committees who are going to be putting forward recommendations. After we complete that, we are going to move into a commissioner update, and there's a number of topics that we have suggested here. And again, we want to give the commissioner latitude. We know there's a lot going on right now between budget negotiations and the 507 plan and FMAP, and it's been a very busy first couple months of 2022. So we will listen to the commissioner, provide us with an update, and hopefully respond to some of the recommendations. And then we're going to break for lunch. We'll take a short 30-minute break. After lunch, we'll come back, convene, and we will hear a presentation on where the 507 plan currently is, and be able to ask questions. After the 507 plan, we are going to have a discussion on the COVID report plan. As many of you are aware, last year legislation tasked the DDAC with overseeing a report on COVID, kind of looking at the state's response to COVID and how it impacted people with IDD in our service system. And we are pleased to have partnered with the DDPC, who will be presenting to us a plan on how to move forward on that, because that is due in September. And then we'll allow our normal time for public comment. So that's our current agenda. And without further delay, Michelle.
All right, thank you, Nick. Good morning, everybody. We too are very pleased to be gathering again and having our DDAC meeting. Obviously there were some things that occurred last year that were unforeseen, really did need to cause us to take a little bit of a moment to repause. There was all of that FMAP legislation. There was a new governor, there was a new commissioner, but we've been anxiously awaiting the opportunity to be able to sit down with our new commissioner and with all of you. We had so many new members who joined us last year, and I think we had like 2 meetings before we kind of needed to take a pause because of current events that were happening. So we're glad to be back with all of you and have you with us this morning. So Josie, are you able to show the presentation, or are you going to try to have me pull it up?
I'll do it. Just give me 1 second.
Thank you.
Michelle, while Josie's doing that, I've gotten a couple of emails that members are having some difficulty signing on. So I just
Okay.
want to be aware of that.
Thanks, Josie. Are you able to click buttons for me when I ask, and just also help Nick with whoever's having some trouble joining?
You just tell me when you want me to move the slides.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. So as I said, we had so many new members join last year. We were really at a point of trying to reset ourselves as the DDAC when we had the new members join last year, and really continue some work that had started under Nick and Carrie Delaney to really kind of pull together exactly how the DDAC was going to function and what its role was. And, one of the things that was, front of mind at the beginning of last year when our new members joined and when we were last meeting was making sure that the DDAC was able to be fulfilling its role as was envisioned by the legislature when the DDAC was founded. So we were doing some conversations about this, but because it's been such a long break, we really thought it would be great to start off with just doing a little presentation as to what we see to be the role of the DDAC and how we are structured, how we do our work, how we look to function both with ourselves and in partnership with OPWDD. Just thought it would be good to start there. So Josie, if you could go to the next slide, that'd be great. So we just wanted to give, just a listing of the membership of the DDAC. If you were with us last year, when we tried to go around the room and get 25 to 30 people to introduce themselves, we end up using a large amount of time. It is certainly our hope that we will be able to be meeting regularly, and that both the members of the DDAC and the public who certainly has an interest and attends the meetings will be able to hear from all of these folks who are on the DDAC and representing the public in this process. But we did want to provide a slide. You can see, we have a fairly good size membership. I think we have room for up to 33, but we have, providers, folks from government backgrounds, non-government backgrounds, family members, self-advocates, so a diverse a group who is with us. Thanks, Josie. Next slide. Wanted to walk through a little bit as to exactly what that legislative charge to the DDAC is, just to make sure that everyone is kind of familiar with what it is that we're supposed to be doing when we get together and do our work. So the charge is in Mental Hygiene Law, Chapter 27, Section 1305, and I pulled this text, right from that language that's included in there. So the first thing that I do think is important for everybody to be aware, because I know I certainly was sitting in on some conversations early on and just kind of making sure people understand that our role is as an advisory council. We don't have any executive, administrative, or appointive duties. And the role of the DDAC is also not you know, to like tell OPWDD what to do. We don't have that authority. We don't, you know, we don't have a vote, a direct vote in what's happening or what the, you know, what direction they may take. But our role is to advise. Our role is to use that diverse experience that we have, our knowledge of what's happening locally on the ground in communities. We all know that sometimes there's unintended consequences and effects of various administrative directives. And so we can be providing that feedback so that we can help inform OPWDD as they go forward and they make the decisions and choose the direction that they need to go in. Our chief, you know, the first role that they do give us is to just foster that understanding and acceptance of people with developmental disabilities, understanding what it means to have a disability. So we are ambassadors. That's our first role. We do want to work in collaboration, a positive collaboration with the commissioner to provide recommendations for statewide priorities and goals for services. So that is definitely part of our role and what we seek to do. Next slide, Josie. It is written into the legislation that charges the DDAC that we are to advise on the development and implementation of the 507 plan. And we pulled under that note section the language from chapter 5.07 that talks about the role of the advisory council, both our advisory council and the Behavioral Health Advisory Council, in providing those recommendations for priorities and goals. We have a role in guiding comprehensive planning, resource allocation, and evaluation processes for state and local services. And there's much more in that chapter 507, but you know, I wanted to stick to, you know, the overall charge to the DDAC, but I encourage people who are interested in that to go to that link and you can read further about exactly what it says for us there. Next slide. Okay, so when it comes to the work that we're doing, the legislature gives us the authority to consider any matter relating to the improvement of services through OPWDD. So anything that, you know, comes before the council that the council members have agreed is something that the DDAC should be looking into, weighing in on, considering, learning more about, so that we can better advise. We have authority to go ahead and do that. And then we are able to advise the commissioner, obviously, on any matter relating to the performance of their duties at OPWDD as they relate to providing services to people with individual disabilities. And we have a role in advising the commissioner on policies, goals, budget, and operational issues at OPWDD. Next slide, please. It's also written in the charge to the DDAC that we are to review all proposed regulations and report our recommendation on those proposed regulations to the commissioner within 30 days. So the commissioner under the legislation has an obligation to present all proposed regulations to the DDAC to solicit their feedback prior to any regulations being finalized and put into law. A word on that, we did talk about that a little bit last year. It was actually brought to our attention by Roger, and we appreciate that he did bring that to our attention. And we did a little discussing because we're not really sure that the best use of the DDAC is to weigh in on every single regulation that might need to come forth out of OPWDD. But certainly we were talking about being advised of all of the regulations that were being put forth by OPWDD, and that the DDAC may choose to weigh in and may choose to not have any comment on certain regulations. So we were starting to talk about a process for that last year. We also have a role in assisting the commissioner with the development and assessment of the triennial state plan, which is issued by the office. And I have to say, this one I'm a little less familiar with, but I do believe the triennial state plan goes into a bit of data and statistics in regards to how many people are being served, how many people are expected to be served, race, ethnicity, demographics, what types of services are being provided, what are the utilization of those services. And we do, under the law, have the ability to be participating and providing some assistance to OPWDD in regards to that. As part of that, it says that the DDAC has the ability to periodically assess the local planning process that is used by OPWDD to make recommendations and develop these reports. So we do have an opportunity to be involved in, when there's various stakeholder forums or places where OPWDD is going to get information to inform their work, to assist in looking at, where is that outreach being done? Is it diverse enough, comprehensive enough? Are there places places and people and entities we could be talking with that we're not, and provide a little bit of feedback in regards to that. And the citation for, where Chapter 13.05 can be found is on that slide. So again, I encourage any of our members or anyone in the public who's interested in more information to go there. Next slide, Josie. Looks like she's trying to get reconnected. Okay, thank you. So, well, she's going to bring it back up. What she's going to bring up is a slide that talks about the committees and the role and function of committees at the DDAC. And we had mentioned this a few times last year and tried to communicate it, in writing a few times to our members. But it's really important for our members to understand that, the DDAC meetings are quarterly meetings. So there's a limited amount of work that you can get done in a quarterly meeting, 4 hours generally when we were meeting in person, and through the pandemic period, we were meeting 2 hours virtually. We have committees on the DDAC, and it's really critical that our members identify a committee that they'd like to be a part of or two, and engage in the work through those committees, because that is where you're going to have that opportunity to really get to know the fellow DDAC members and have be able to kind of make an impact in the work that the DDAC is doing. The committees look at issues very closely. They consider any matters that they identify that are related to services that are being provided, that are relating to the experience of individuals and families, that look at planning, fiscal, and consumer affairs. Whatever the committee may identify that they need to look at, they do, and they talk to people, they gather information, and committees are where our recommendations start. Committees bring forth the recommendations that get discussed at the DDAC meetings and potentially get forwarded on to OPWDD for their consideration. So it is really important that our members engage in those committees. The council can establish any committees they deem necessary, and that discretion is with the chair, so with Nick Capoletti, with the advice of the commissioner. And it is certainly possible, we're going to be hearing about the 507 plan today, that if OPWDD is taking some, new directions, or there's some things, we may find that the committees we have aren't going to meet the needs of what OPWDD requires our advice on. So we need to be flexible about our committees and be able to respond to the planning process that's happening at OPWDD so that we can be in alignment with their work. That was another thing we were talking about with OPWDD a lot last year, is how do we align? We have a lot of members on the DDAC who have a lot of interests, a lot of things that, are important that they're able to identify that have an impact on services and individuals. but if we're out of step with what the focus is at OPWDD or things that they need to be working on, then our advice just kind of falls out of time. So we want it to be timely and in line with the things that they're working on. And that said, does not mean that we can't identify things that we bring to OPWD and say, you might not be working on this, but you really do. But we want to make sure that there's a good communication and alignment between what they need advice from, given that we are their advisory council. And obviously we can prepare any reports and submit any information that we deem to be necessary on the to OPWDD regarding the work of the council. Next slide. So our next slide, there's two of these slides, just kind of walks through our current DDAC committees and who they are. And they're going to have a chance, I'm not going to read these through to everybody. They're going to have a chance in a little bit later in the agenda to talk a little bit about their committees. They may be talking about just a summary of some recommendations they've already made. They may be discussing some recommendations they'd like to bring forth to us today. And in some cases, they would like to be talking about, a real need to get some to membership to join the work. So we do have a residential committee that's under the leadership of John Maltby, who's here, who's looking at all things residential. Systems committee, Dolores and I are co-chairs of that committee, and we look at kind of broad service system initiatives and frameworks. We look at communication and how that's happening. So that's what we're doing there. Health and Wellness is led by Gary Goldstein, and they look at things that have to do with all kinds like medical health, dental health, and also behavioral health needs, and how that impacts on the overall well-being of individuals with developmental disabilities in New York State. All right, next slide. So this is two areas where I do want to spend just a little bit of time on is self-direction and employment and meaningful activities. Self-direction was kind of in its own little pause for a while, and we're very happy to be getting things going again under that self-direction committee with Stuart Flom as the chair of that committee. I know he's going to talk about what they're doing and their need for members to join. So they're really looking at, the encouragement of self-direction in New York State as a mode of receiving services, support for individuals and families who are utilizing those services. They're going to look at the design of the service, its ability to meet people's needs, things like resource allocations, access, provider issues related to brokers, fiscal intermediaries, et cetera, and really look at opportunities to improve that service. And then employment and meaningful activities for adults was a committee that was identified early on. As I said, I should go back and I'll say it in a second. Let me finish this and I'll go back. It was one of the first committees that we had identified, but it had a little bit of a slower start. There was, I think the person who was running it at the time ended up with some health issues and never quite got off the ground. It's getting off the ground now with Susan Heatherton, who's a PhD affiliated with University of Rochester and Strong, and Shamika Andrews, a self-advocate. And, they really, really want to take a deep dive look into employment for individuals with developmental disabilities and meaningful community activities and how people are connected to their community. So they want to look at, how is that happening right now? Are people satisfied with how it's happening? How can we innovate in those areas and enhance cross-systems collaboration to improve those things? So Susan will be talking and Shamika will be talking to you about that a little bit more, and I encourage you to take a look at that. Family Support Services is currently represented on the DDAC by Margaret Puddington. I understand they've had a recent change of leadership there. I'll let Margaret talk about the specifics, but that's a unique committee because they have separate legislation that authorizes them. And so their memberships are elected locally. Their members are not part of the DDAC, and they kind of operate under that separate legislation. But the law does require that the person who leads FSS be a member of the DDAC. And then we do have an executive committee, which is comprised of Nick as our chair and all of the committee chairs. And that executive committee really kind of works to set the priorities for the DDAC, including development of our meeting agendas. So what I should have said at the beginning, I apologize, is that these committees were part of the work that Nick and Carrie Delaney had done to start kind of transforming how we do our work at the DDAC. Several years back, when Carrie Delaney was in, the membership was concerned about having presentations from OPWDD be the bulk of our meeting time, and wanted to make sure that the members had a meaningful way to weigh in. And so the committee's structure was formatted at that time and gave us the opportunity to have these deeper dive looks into the issues, really kind of come up with some expert analysis on those issues and bring forth the recommendations to the full DDAC for consideration at our quarterly meetings, just to make things more efficient and for our feedback to be more meaningful. Next slide, please.
Michelle?
Yes.
Yeah, I would just add that another component of the committees actually allowed us to bring in subject matter experts who can contribute and have done so in a very meaningful way, and provided us with advice and counsel and help complement, where we had situations where the DDAC did not have full membership because of people transitioning off and not getting appointments in. It's at least given us the opportunity to bring in some other perspectives, as well as talent that helps us do our work as a council.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this gives kind of a little visual of the committees, and you see that the DDAC on the top is kind of the small. Here's the DDAC, but what's the bulk of the DDAC? It's these committees, right? And where this work is getting done. And what Nick just discussed is kind of described there under membership. That the committees are led by a member of the DDAC. There's certainly, we want our DDAC members to be participating, but there is room to bring in those subject matter experts under that as well. So this just describes the committees here in a visual format. And what I wanted to take a moment to comment on is that the committees are part of the DDAC. There's also some task force in New York that have been the dental task force operationalized for many, many years, and definitely had a strong relationship with OPWDD, looking at issues of oral health and how to improve access to those services for individuals with developmental disabilities. So the task force, that model for the dental task force has now been modeled, and there's been a medical task force that's been created. And there's been a multi-system complex behavioral task force that's been recommended as part of the Health and Wellness Committee's 507 recommendations to OPWDD. These task forces are not they're not part and parcel of the DDAC. They're separate entities that are looking at these issues, but obviously their feedback is critical to the Health and Wellness Committee being able to do, their job well and function in their role well. And so the chairs of those task forces are and or will, in the case of the Complex Behavioral Task Force, be automatically a member of the Health and Wellness Committee of the DDAC. So it's just a means for that particular committee to get that subject matter expertise on what's happening across New York State in those areas to inform whatever recommendations they may bring forward to the DDAC. Okay, next slide. So we had done a lot of work leading up to when we kind of, had our members joining us last year about the committee process. And I think it's good just to do an orientation for everyone in regards to this, so that if you're sitting in on a committee, you understand the role of how it interacts with what happens at the DDAC meetings. So the committee meetings over on the left, are called by the chair or the co-chairs. The vision is that each committee will have co-chairs eventually. So the committee meetings are called and facilitated by the co-chairs. The committee discusses the matters that they've identified that they want to be working on, and any recommendations that are formed at the committee level get prioritized by the co-chairs, and they get put to writing. They get put into writing and submitted to the chair and vice chair of the DDAC. The chair and vice chair then have the opportunity to review those draft recommendations, might make some suggestions or requests for revision. But once there's something that's finalized, that final draft comes forward to the council, who then the full council reviews those recommendations and that request, has any discussion about it. And if the full council endorses that recommendation through a vote, then the written proposal is presented to OPWDD. And one of the things that we had worked on in that partnership with OPWDD is that we've had committees, since this process, this committee formation was started, that have spent a lot of time putting forth recommendations, developing recommendations, and having that submitted to OPWDD. And for what, for lots of good reasons, I'm sure, have not always had a response back on that. And it's really critical in terms of, having that effective partnership and having us be able to work in that role as an advisory council, that we do get some feedback, and also just that the members are acknowledged for the work that's being done. I think it's important, again, for the members to understand our recommendations are not, must-dos to OPWDD, but we do want to have some feedback, received back. And there had been a commitment made that if we provided those, about 6 weeks before the previous meeting, or the next scheduled meeting, I'm sorry, that we would hear back from OPWDD that, hey, this is a good idea, but we need some more information. This is a good idea, but yeah, we're going to go right ahead. Let's implement this. Or yeah, this is not something that we really can look at this time, and why, so that the people who are doing this work and developing it are recognized for the work they're doing, and also have some sense as to whether, if it isn't going forward, why not, so that that can inform the future work that they're doing as well. Next slide. So just some general guidance. We already talked about the first bullet point. When a committee brings forth those recommendations, it shouldn't just be the recommendations. We should also have in writing, any significant deliberations that led up to those recommendations, which would include, comments, supports, recommendations that were made by people who might not have supported it. So we want to hear, here's why we think we should go forward, but here were some things, some cautionary advice that came up in our conversation, so that the DDAC can make an informed vote on any of those recommendations. They must be presented in writing. They must be advanced by a vote. They must be supported by a majority of the full council in order to go forward to the commissioner. And in our bylaws, it says that a record of all the recommendations made by the council, determined by that majority vote, will be maintained by OPWDD. That language comes from our bylaws. And the final slide. So just some general guidance. When our new members were appointed, you received kind of like a handbook type thing. It has the I'm sorry, I'm not a lawyer. Is it chapter 13.05 of the mental hygiene law that, talks about the charge to the DDAC. You definitely want to be familiar with that. You want to be familiar with the bylaws and the practices that the DDAC has been using. It is essential that our members are aware of conflict of interest policies, know when they need to recuse themselves. That's Public Officers Law 74. And we do want to make a practice of having minutes of meetings that include, any requests or responses or action items, just so that we don't kind of lose sight of where we are from one meeting to the next, because we know we're looking at a lot of important things, and that's easy to do. We want to make sure we're following up and staying on top of the things that we've said that we were going to do mutually, again, in partnership with OPWDD. So that would be the presentation. I don't know, we want to, should we ask if there's any questions, Nick, here, or just leave that for a conversation later, or?
We can, if, again, we want to stay on schedule, so if anybody has a quick question, we can certainly entertain it here. And Josie, just, we did get a couple requests from people to send them a copy of the slide, so I don't know if you can post it, if there's a chat section to post it to, or if they just request it from you, if you could send it to them.
So why don't we
I cannot share it in the chat section, but I can email it to people after the meeting. Unfortunately, my hands are tied during the meeting.
Sure, thank you.
And Josie, it can be posted under our meeting section on the OPWDD site, because I think it's important. The public will probably want to have it as well.
Okay, I'll look into having that done.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If you're not a member of one of the subcommittees, can you send information as a DDAC member to that subcommittee if you have it?
Yeah, I don't know why not. Of course, yeah.
Sure.
I think more information is the better. And just Jerry, so we've also we're trying to change the DDAC it's the committees of the DDAC. We were trying to get away from that subcommittee language.
Subcommittee or the
Yes,
committees.
yeah.
All right. Well, all right. It's just that I'm not on the health committee, but I do have a dentist here on Long Island that has a plan and that would like to be able to present a plan to help individuals. So if I could connect him with the health, but I'm not specifically on that committee. All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
perfect.
Thank
So one of the things we did want to do, we're going to switch up the agenda a little bit. We know that some of our members have been asking about the appointment legislation that was signed into law by Governor Hochul, and we did have that down under the commissioner update. We're going to move that up here because it kind of goes with our conversation about who the DDAC is and how we're functioning in our role. So why don't we switch over to Roger and let him give us an update on that legislation, how it's going to impact us.
Absolutely, and thanks, Michelle. I think that was a terrific overview of the DDAC, its role and responsibilities. Really appreciate you putting that together. So yeah, there was legislation that was signed into law that permits the legislature to make appointments to the DDAC. I believe the legislation has an effective date of either June 30th or July 1 of this year. So beginning at that point, the legislature will have authority to make certain appointments to the DDAC. So what that means operationally is that the DDAC is going to need to amend its bylaws to reflect that change in the law. It's not something I think we're going to do at this meeting, but at a subsequent meeting, and we'll work together with you to achieve that, because the current bylaws don't include that power, which now exists. I believe that there will be a total of 10 seats, which will be legislatively appointed, with 4 belonging to each of the 2 majority houses and 1 to each of the minority houses. So that gets us up to the 10. So as terms end for certain members or certain vacant seats that currently exist remain unfilled, those will become appointed seats. It won't all be at once because there are terms, and I think the way that the terms of the members work is that they tend to be staggered. So we, a third of each terms rotate off once per year. So it's not as if I think there's going to be 10 new appointees as of that July 1 date, but over time. So operationally, we'll just need to fix the bylaws to reflect that legislative change, and then obviously the legislature will have that authority.
Very good. Thank you, Roger. Michelle, are we done?
Yep, all set. Thank you.
That was a great overview, and hopefully it again gives everybody a good foundation and understanding of the DDAC. We know we've had a lot of change, both in membership and some time has passed. So let's move forward with the next item on our agenda, which actually does go to the committees. And we're asking each committee to give us a 5-minute update. We need to kind of keep this so that it moves along. A 5-minute update on what their committee has been up to, and as well as any recommendations that they have to be presented today. So why don't we start with John Maltby, Chair of the Residential Committee.
Thanks, Nick, and good morning, everyone. The Residential Committee has 13 members, a good sprinkling of family members, but also subject matter experts from both the provider industry and from other fields, including development and construction. And we have several ex officio members from OPWDD who join us at our meetings, and we meet quarterly, so slightly ahead of the normal quarterly schedule for the DDAC itself. I've shared the crosswalk of our recommendations that we've made as a committee to the council, and which the council has accepted, beginning with our first recommendations back in 2016, and how those recommendations correlate with various other reports that have been issued both by OPWDD itself, for example, the report to the legislature, the report of the transformation panel, and so on. So rather than reiterate those recommendations, it would be easier for me, I think, and for everybody else, to refer to that if you're looking for specific recommendations, but they include, for example, increasing the housing subsidy to match the HUD minimum level, the HUD's fair market rentals. Very pleased to see that that is perhaps imminently going to happen. Recommendations to allow agencies to repurpose existing properties that are no longer fit for purpose, and to do so readily and easily, which right now is not possible. Recommendations to eliminate the 15-minute increment in services for ComHab, for example, which has the effect of piling on administrative costs and DSP time to no obvious effective purpose, and to include services such as housing navigation as a waiver service. But if anybody wants to see a copy of that, I'm very happy to share it, and I believe Josie has a copy. But at our last meeting, we concluded that rather than, again, hammer away at these recommendations that have already been accepted by the council and forwarded, we have an opportunity at this time, at a time when we have new people in both the governor's office and in OPWDD, federal funds available to help us to do new initiatives at a time when we're looking at the 507 plan, that this will be a really opportune time for us to actually convene, for OPWDD to convene a group of stakeholders from all over the state, including people with developmental disabilities, their families, but also including professionals and experts in the field, to figure out what we're going to do for housing for the next decade. We're working with a 40-year-old system that's falling apart at the seams, and that is unsustainable. And we're finding more and more that, and perhaps when we do our review of what's happening as a result of the pandemic, we'll see even more gaps in the system. So I think now is an opportunity for us to do that. We recommended to the council, and I'm going to read the recommendation that we made, that within a month, OPWDD convene a stakeholder group to formulate a strategy for housing for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities for the next decade. That this group review all types of housing for people with IDD in New York and elsewhere, and provide a written report to the council within 3 months of its formation. So that was the proposition that we put to the council. And I don't know, Nick, if now is the time to discuss that further, or if you want to do that later. But that's our only formal recommendation that we're making this time around.
Thank you, John. And we did disseminate this to our members, and I just want to acknowledge, I think we lost Michelle. She's going to try to sign back on. I'd like to open it up for any discussion by members. Okay, again, we received no dissent. We sent it up. Can we, I'd like to ask the members for a vote to approve and approvals or acceptance.
This is Suzanne Levang. I'll make the first motion.
Very good. Thank you, Suzanne. Second?
This is Shamika Andrews. I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Shamika. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, thank you, John. And we will take that recommendation and Commissioner formally put it forth to you. John, anything else from residential?
I think that's it, Nick. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Let me go. I don't know if Michelle has joined us, and I know Michelle and Dolores both represent the Systems Committee. So what I'll do is I'll move to Gary. Gary, can you do your presentation on health and wellness?
Hi. Hello, Commissioner. Welcome. I am very much looking forward to working with you over the next few years to try and help improve the health of people with disabilities in New York. As Michelle mentioned, we have a little bit of a complex organization here. We've got 3 task forces, or 2 actually, and 1 in formation. And we also, which works directly with OPWDD, at least the dental task force has for about 20 years now, been working with OPDD, trying to improve dental care. And we'd love an opportunity, each of these groups would love an opportunity to meet with you directly, to go over the history and go over some of the programs we've done, and to introduce you to the approximately 80 dentists and currently about 8 physicians that are volunteering their time to try and come up with recommendations and to improve care. I don't have to go over, some of the past recommendations have actually been considered and we're doing. One was that we established the health and wellness, we established the medical task force and supported that. We continued with the dental, and that's happening. We have a post-COVID analysis of what happened and try and look back so we can try and improve, and that's happening. We are still working on there's some outstanding recommendations relative to complex behavior, and if Dolores gets back on, she can talk about that in my remaining time, and as well as expansion of medical, dental, behavioral, telehealth to the greatest extent possible to serve our members. But the task forces and the committee are still active and are working on a couple of initiatives right now. On the medical side, they're looking at the issue of how to stop choking deaths, try and improve outcomes relative to that, trying to build on the good works done in the past by OPWD on this area and see what the next step, how to bring it to the next step. And on the dental side, we're in the middle of a crisis. And the crisis has to do with operating room availability for dental cases. And the task force is in the process of wordsmithing a document and a recommendation surrounding that. But the bottom line is that there's a scarcity of appointments available for dental care in the operating rooms. And we feel that it's reached a point that it's not proper to wait a year, 2 years for dental treatment. And we understand the environmental concerns, but that we have some recommendations and thoughts on how we could immediately improve the situation as a crisis, due to the crisis. Is Dolores on?
Dolores is on.
Yes, I'm here.
Would you like to just comment a little on the behavioral health recommendation and where that stands?
Sure. So our charge is looking at children and adults with complex behavioral needs with or without a behavioral health diagnosis. So unlike the dental and the medical task forces, we thought that establishing an independent task force in this area will not affect the kinds of changes needed to improve support for those with complex behavior in the families. So instead, we've submitted to the prior administration recommendations for consideration related to the 507 plan that include OPWDD specific actions and those requiring OPWDD, OMH, and OASIS collaboration. One such action is for the 3 agencies to convene a time-limited task force or advisory council, whatever we want to call it, that includes leadership from the state agencies, along with stakeholders such as DDAC, the Conference of Local Mental Hygiene Directors, DDPC, health homes across systems, health advocates, families, provider associations, DSPs. It should be tasked with examining issues and recommending actionable, meaningful strategies to build a better system of supports for this population. And we've identified potential actions for this group. So we're awaiting a dialogue response from OPWDD, and there are a couple of work group members here, and please add to what I've already said.
That's a very good summary, Dolores. And that's, we support that effort, of course, and that's something we've been waiting a while to try and hear back about interagency cooperation and the possibility of having that happen. So we'll give perhaps, does anybody else want to chime in? Okay, so just one more quick comment. Thank you. One more quick comment. The dental task force and the medical task force not only make recommendations to this group, DDAC, but also work with representatives from OPWDD directly. And we're going to pass our thoughts along to them and hopefully have action taken, or at least support of action taken in that direction also. So we hope to meet with you, Commissioner, and give you a chance to meet with the various professionals that are volunteering time and quite a bit of time to help. So thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Again, very important work that all 3 task force have done, and the committee has done a great job. Let's move on. I see we have Michelle back. So Michelle and Dolores, would you like to update us on the Systems Committee?
Sure.
You can take the lead, Dolores. Go ahead.
Okay. So yes, Michelle and I are co-chairs. And over the past couple of years, our committee members have spent a considerable amount of time identifying issues of concern and making recommendations to improve the way people experience systems both within and outside of OPWDD. All of our recommendations were adopted by the council and submitted to the prior administration, including recommendations for inclusion in the 507 plan. Since we submitted those recommendations, we've only met once or twice because we didn't want to dive into another topic while we're waiting to have a discussion or response to our recommendations. Michelle, anything to add, or committee members?
No, I think that says it.
Yep. Okay. Anything else, Dolores? You all set? Great. Thank you. I'd like to move forward, and Stuart Flom, chair of the recently reincarnated SelfDirection Committee.
Thank you so much, Nick. And it's a very hard, a very difficult opportunity for me because we don't have a committee with members. We've had some interest, but quite frankly, I'm going to appeal to the council right now that for the SelfDirection Committee to be in step with communication, with making recommendations and have them heard by the Executive Council and ultimately by OPWDD, we really need a very broad range of people who come to the committee or at least reach out to me and ask me, you know, how do we envision at this very early stage for the committee to roll out? Because, you know, self-direction can be very granular. It's like, it can be every family for themselves. And I think that doesn't speak to the larger need and role that we have at the DDAC. I would love for people to come forward. And I heard earlier today by Jerry saying, you know, people who are subject matter experts. I think we need people to be on the committee, to show interest, to recommend other people who are subject matter experts who can bring in a much broader approach to self-direction than the family speaking for themselves. Because each family is key, but unless we can put it all together, we don't really have a meaningful program. I think it's easy to say that self-direction is the future of supports and services in New York State and perhaps across the country. And I think that we have a great opportunity to sync with John's committee on the residential side, because so many of the folks who are desiring home ownership or living in the community also are receiving their supports through self-direction. So I ask everybody on the call here to please reach out to me and let's talk about how we can collaborate. You know, I'm not asking for a deep dive from anybody, but I am asking for, you know, ask some questions, because I know that I want diversity from the panel, from the council on the committee.
Could I ask a question?
Sure, Leah.
Yes, I have spoken to you, Stuart, and about my deep interest in the Self-Direct Committee. So, you know, at some point we spoke that I was on the committee. I'm a little confused.
I think, Leah, I think this is a conversation that you very much want to have with me, but I think it's more appropriate offline. In fact, if you want to make some time today to talk, mention a time after the meeting, and we can talk some more about this.
What's the criteria you're looking for?
Thought leadership in any area.
So I think Stuart is making a call out for members. So Leah, certainly, you know, reach out to Stuart, and if there are any other members who are interested in self-direction, if any members have any non-member subject matter experts that they would like to suggest, certainly we want to get, as Stuart said, some of that broader perspective, brokers or fiscal intermediaries who could participate in helping really form that committee. So thank you, Stuart. Let's move to Susan Hetherington and Shamika Andrews on employment and meaningful activities for adults.
Okay, hi, this is Shamika. I believe I am doing our update. Hi, everyone. We are very excited to have this group up and running. Finally, we've had lots of discussions over name and mission and things like that. So we're really glad to kind of have a mission. We had lots of vibrant discussion on our mission, and Michelle went over that earlier, and some of our goals. We currently have 7 members of our group, and at our next meeting, John Robinson, who is the CEO of Our Ability and the head of the Business Leadership Network, will be joining us. So we're looking forward to that, as John has done a lot of work in this area and supporting people with disabilities in the area of employment. We are also looking to have a meeting with the commissioner and also Julia Kelly, who works in employment for OPWDD. So we will be making that request very soon to have those meetings. You did see earlier of our goals that we're working on, so I won't really review that. I think Susan is on. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Thanks, Shamika. That was a great summary of the work we've been doing. I did want to say how excited we are as a committee about the legislatures and the commissioners' interest in employment. It's such a huge issue, and I think it's taken way too long to come to the forefront, but we feel like it is now. And along with Stuart, I want to say that anyone who is interested in this committee, who is on the DDAC, please let us know. We now have a combination of self-advocates, parent advocates, and subject areas experts, but we can always use more. This is a huge area. So thank you. And we look forward to hearing from folks.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Shamika. That was great overview, and we certainly all support the work that the committee is doing, especially in employment. I'd like to now go to Family Support Services. And before I ask Margaret to kind of represent FSS, just to be clear, FSS has been, is established as a standing committee of the DDAC. We do not, the DDAC does not appoint members to FSS. The FSS has its own committee and then reports to the DDAC. So representing FSS is Margaret Puddington. Hi, Margaret.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Just to update you, I have retired, more or less, from the Statewide Family Support Services Committee. And a new chair has been elected. He is Chris Palega, and I hope that he will be joining the DDAC in a timely manner. But in the meanwhile, I will report just couple of recommendations. Bear repeating at this moment. I'm not going to go through all of them, just a couple of them. One is to ensure local councils have input to any spending decisions that affect family support services, either additions or cuts. Another was to collect and share data about utilization of family support programs. And another one, which feeds into what I want to really talk about, is that we wanted OPW to develop consistent guidelines for family reimbursement programs. So the last two meetings that we've had have been focused essentially on the blue family reimbursement ADM. I'm sorry for that banging in the background. That's the heat in this building. OPW did come up with draft ATM for family reimbursement, but we were not shown the draft. There was a small subcommittee of 5 who were permitted to see the draft, but because our committee is charged with representing families' interests, we really asked to be included in the opportunity to give feedback on the new guidelines that were proposed, or the draft that was proposed. So we did. The rest of the committee did give feedback and did reach out to our local family support advisory councils to get their input as well. And some of our recommendations, which we presented in writing to OPWDD, some of our recommendations were accepted, but for the most part, the major points, which we had strong disagreements with, were not changed. We went through detailed discussion for 2 meetings on these items, and I just wanted to summarize that the ADM is now in effect. It will be implemented on July 1st, and I wanted to summarize what our disagreements were very, very briefly. We had expected guidelines on items that would be eligible for reimbursement and would not be eligible for reimbursement. And that's pretty much not what we got. We got some of it. We got a little bit of that, but we got instead a redesign of the whole program where there is now a statewide cap per person of $3,000 for family reimbursement. And that has to encompass goods and services, camp, and respite reimbursement. That doesn't work very well statewide because the needs are very different across the state. Upstate, apparently there are not family respite programs. Downstate, there are respite programs. Upstate, the only way that families really have access to respite is through private pay or through family reimbursement. And if you take $3,000 and you divide that up, you get about maybe 10 sessions a year of respite for a few hours each, which is really, it's not sufficient. But if that number doesn't work well downstate where we don't have that need. If people don't use camp, they might only need $500, say, or less in family reimbursement in the year. So we objected to there being a statewide cap. It may encourage families to ask for more stuff than they really, really need. If 3,000 might be too much in some cases and not enough in other cases. So another major issue that we had disagreements with is that when family reimbursement is used for emergencies, there will now be a lifetime cap of one such payment for each type of emergency, so that if you have bed bugs, you can only be reimbursed for that treatment once. If you are, if you have a leak in your apartment that you're responsible for, you have to, only one time can you get reimbursed for that. The big one really is respite reimbursement. If a family member is hospitalized and you need to have respite to take care of the child, you can only do that once. But you can't, I mean, in life, people do get recurrent illnesses. You may get all kinds of different situations where you need to have emergency reimbursement for respite, and that's not going to be possible anymore. Apparently, you can go to the DDRO and appeal, but on paper, it says only one reimbursement for each type of emergency. The other major piece is that the paperwork burden is going to increase really tremendously. Now, with an application, you have to send in your life plan, a verification that the person resides with the family, a verification of eligibility, and the DDRO will have to issue prior approval for any payment that is made. There's a whole tracking system that is being set up, which is going to be really, really burdensome for the providers, the families, and the DDRO. For instance, in Manhattan, we have 13 different providers for family reimbursement. That means that the DDRO is going to have to sign off pretty much, give permission on maybe thousands of reimbursement requests over the year. And the result is going to be huge delays for families needing the reimbursement. So going forward, we still would request that we have input in the beginning of the planning process. We know that we don't, you know, as Michelle said, for the DDAC, we don't have decision-making authority, but we do have the ability to recommend. We would like to have this input in the beginning of the process going forward, and we would like to be able to see the actual drafts of the of whatever is being proposed and whatever ADM is being proposed. We
Okay.
also talked about a gap analysis, a study that was done by
Margaret, I just want to be sensitive to time.
Okay, this is very quick, very, very quick.
Okay.
It was work that was done by a very small subgroup of our committee, comparing family support programs, what they offer with what waiver programs offer. And what the findings were, just in a broad overview, was family support programs offer more accessibility, more flexibility. They can address the whole family. And there are many programs in family support that have no counterparts in waivers, such as advocacy, educational advocacy, benefits counseling, training groups, and so on. And so that was a very useful thing that our committee has come up with.
Great.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Margaret. And I want to thank all the committees. And Commissioner, I hope that served as a good introduction to some of the work that the different committees in the Developmental Disability Advisory Council does. You can see that there's, you know, I think between the 5 committees, 6 committees, well, 6 committees that we currently have, in addition to the executive committee, we have probably over 100 either council members or invited members participating in the work that they're doing, developing recommendations, looking at the system, soliciting feedback. We have cross-representation of self-advocates, parents, providers, subject matter experts who are willing to give their time and energy to develop these recommendations. So we appreciate the work of every one of the committees. With that, I think we're pretty much done with our committee recommendations. Any questions? Okay. Thank you all. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to the Commissioner. Commissioner?
Great, thanks, Nick. And thanks to everybody for your presentations this morning. I agree, Michelle, the overall presentation about the DDAC and you know, just going into the details about, you know, the legislation and what the DDAC is authorized and asked to do was really helpful for me, given this is my first DDAC meeting and really my introduction to the work. And then hearing about the work that the committees do, I really appreciate the presentations and also understanding really the, you know, the depth of the work that each committee is working on. And obviously, you know, we're very grateful to everyone's commitment to this work and commitment to partnership. And I think somebody said it, I think that we're at, you know, a really exciting point. I think it was John who said it, right, between having an incredibly supportive governor, the opportunity with the ARPA funds and the enhanced FMAP, and, you know, really an incredibly robust and, you know, invigorating 507 planning process that took place over the summer, and that we're, you know, in the midst of getting the draft out now. I just think there's a lot of synergy, a lot of energy, and a lot of opportunity to move forward. And obviously, the partnership between, you know, all of our really important stakeholders, self-advocates, family members, providers, you know, and obviously you all are representative of all of those groups. I think there's a lot of real opportunity to move forward. So I'm very excited about that, very grateful. You know, I'm really excited to be here in this position, you know, with the incredible, you know, incredible folks who work here at the agency and all of our stakeholders to be moving all of these ideas forward. So thanks for the presentation. Thanks for the time. Thanks for your commitment. I think at this point I have met many of you. For those of you who I have not met yet, I'm, you know, happy to be working with you. I'll be very quick about my background. I think, you know, at this point, like I said, you know, folks have heard me do my sort of introductory spiel in lots of settings, so I'll spare people repetition. I've been here in this role for about 5 months. You know, I have spent a lot of my time, you know, traveling as much as I can. You know, COVID has been a little bit restrictive, but we've been out and about a lot lately. And certainly, you know, before that, you know, having lots of meet and greet conversations, trying to get to know everybody. My door and my email are very open. So if we haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, then, you know, would really like that. And would love to have the introduction with the medical and dental groups, that you mentioned, Gary, so look forward to that. And to anybody else, right? I mean, my philosophy is that the best way for me to get to understand the systems, the strengths, and the weaknesses is to really just be talking to the folks who it impacts and to understand all the various angles and the different perspectives. And that, like I said, here and other places, right, the team here at OPWDD are really incredible and, brilliant and committed. And I think, hearing the ideas from externals and then bringing them back to this team, I think there's a lot of opportunity, to address some of the concerns. So happy to be having those conversations. And I guess what I love about traveling and talking and going out is that, in this position, right, and in my previous position in the governor's office, things often bubble up when there's a problem, right? But what I'm learning by talking to folks and being out in the field is how wonderful the programs are, how, varied across the state, and, really like the level of expertise that we have in New York, between our providers and our self-advocates and our family members is pretty incredible. So I love getting to hear also the success stories and seeing the success stories and meeting the people that we're serving and seeing how the services and the programs that we all collectively support are changing people's lives. So that's also a really wonderful, piece of what I've been up to over the last couple of months. I think in terms of what, as an agency, we've been focused on, there's a lot of work going on around the 507 planning process. I think everybody knows, and this group of obviously really important, participants in the stakeholder feedback that took place over the summer. We've had several different iterations of a draft 507 report that we're expecting to get out in the middle of April. It's a document that I think we at the agency are really proud of, the way that it takes a lot of stakeholder feedback, including the work that you all have done in your committees, and brings it together and really focuses us around overarching goals, and then the outcomes underneath each goal that we'll be hoping to achieve over the next period of time, and that it's a document that has been informed by our collective desires for where we want to see our field go. And I think what's incredible and what you guys maybe don't see as much is internally the way that the team is working to orient itself around the strategic plan. And Roger and the Office of Strategic Initiatives has been doing an incredible amount of work for us as an agency to really not just be creating a strategic plan that we sort of pop on our website and then kind of go around it and go about our business as usual, right? The agency is really orienting itself around the strategic plan and around strategic initiatives to help us achieve those goals. And so that everything that we're doing as we move forward, we're thinking about it through the lens of the goals, through the lens of our strategic initiatives, and how we as a system agree that this is where we want to go, right? And again, I emphasize that this isn't OPWDD's vision, right? This is the system collectively, our vision together of where we want to go, and is what we're doing helping us to achieve those goals? And we ask ourselves that question all the time about everything that we do. If the answer is no, then there's a couple different paths, right? Does that need to go to the end of the line? Is that a critical emergency thing that has to happen regardless of whether or not it fits in our stakeholder, plan? But I think it's important that we're having those conversations and that we're thinking about ourselves and our goals, sort of as the North Star, right, of where we're trying to go, and everything that we do, is meant to support that. So I think it's, really, it's pretty incredible, the work that's been going on. And the 507 plan, the way that it's laid out gives us a lot of opportunity for stakeholder engagement, the way that we have it drafted, and Allison will go into a lot more detail later on in the conversation. The way that we have our plan drafted is that we will be, continuing to solicit feedback even after there's a final document. And of course, on an annual basis, we'll be updating that document and making sure that we're all, continuing to achieve those goals, working towards those goals, and reevaluating whether or not those goals need to shift because something else has changed. So a lot of the work that we're doing right now as an agency has been around that. I guess I would say, in terms of the recommendations that were put forward by the committees today and in the past, I think there's a lot of conversation to have. And, a few of the committees recommended, pulling together work groups. And I think that that we should have conversations, and our Office of Strategic Initiatives are obviously on this call, and they'll be thinking about it too, we'll have to have the conversations around how those work groups and how that work, can be brought into, the ongoing, 507 work that we're doing and the strategic work that we're doing, and making sure that we have the right connection between the work that the work groups are doing, feeding information into our strategic plan, and making sure that it's encompassed as, really meaningful parts of the stakeholder engagement. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And I know the team's already, hearing these recommendations for, different work groups and task force is already sort of thinking about how we can incorporate it into our overall work. So it doesn't get lost, and it doesn't, what I don't want to have happen is that we have separate conversations going on that are not informing each other, right, that are happening in silos. And so, somebody's got a great idea over here, but if it doesn't get connected back into the larger work that we're all doing together, I want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So I think there's, some processes we can put in place to make sure that the work continues and that it's, feeding the overall agenda. So that's exciting. It's really exciting. I think in terms of the budget process, we're, very excited. Obviously, Governor Hochul has been incredibly supportive. I've shared the story many times that when she and I were talking about me coming back to state service and coming back, here to OPWDD, I was really excited by her ideas, right? And, as the governor of the state and, the executive of the state, I wasn't expecting her when we talked to have as many sort of in-depth and progressive ideas about what she wanted to see for us, but, she did, and she cares. And it's not only words, right? Because when her State of the State came out, OPWDD was mentioned 27 times in the State of the State, which is 27 times more than we had mentioned in previous State of the State addresses. And then our, executive budget proposal, reflected her support, through a 12% increase to our overall operating budget, which is, close to $500 million additional going to OPWDD to support the work that we're all doing together. So it's really exciting. Obviously, the legislature came out, each house came out with very strong one-house proposals. And, the executive and the houses of the legislature are now negotiating what I think is going to be, probably the strongest enacted budget that we've seen for this sector in a very, very long time. And there's going to be a lot of opportunity for us to move forward, and be strategic about how we utilize those investments. Obviously, I think one of the biggest areas, and I know it's top of mind for everybody, it's certainly the thing that is on my mind when I go to bed every night and every morning when I wake up, is thinking about the workforce crisis and the situation that we're in with needing to support, our direct support professionals and all the folks who make the work that we do possible every day, right? And I've said it before, we talk about it as a team here, right? All the best ideas in the world don't really amount to anything without people to carry out those ideas, right? And for us, and I think, the pandemic has shown, right, that our staff are not just, folks that we need to show up and do a job, right? They are, the difference between life and death, the difference between, people being able to achieve their goals and, meet their dreams. And they showed up every day during the pandemic, and they continue to show up every day now, even though the job, continues to be difficult and, without enough folks doing it, makes it even harder than it has to be. So, I think everybody knows at this point that through the enhanced FMAP dollars that we got through the American Rescue Plan Act, we invested over 75% of those dollars directly to our direct support professionals. It was, over $1 billion, closer to, 1.2, I guess, billion dollars going directly to direct support professionals. The vast majority of our providers have started to see those funds flow, to them over the course of this past week. There will be additional dollars, the smaller amount of bonuses will be going out over the course of the next couple of months as well to complete that investment, that full investment. But we're excited to see that those dollars are going to be reaching our DSPs in appreciation for the work that they've done over these last 2 years. And then additionally, with the governor's budget proposal, we see a 5.4% COLA, with the exception of last year's 1% COLA is, the first COLA that we've seen in a long time, and as I know is desperately needed. We expect that providers will be using that at least to some extent to continue to support their workforce. And of course, the governor also in her budget proposal has created an additional opportunity for bonuses to go to direct support professionals and other folks doing the work. So not just DSPs, but other titles who work directly with the folks that we support in our programs. And, you know, as I mentioned, right, the houses, the Senate and the Assembly also have, you know, really, you know, great investments in our system and proposals. And so we'll see what comes out on April 1 as the enacted budget. But I have no doubt that whatever happens in the enacted budget, there will be significant support for our workforce included. And so I think that that's really critical, and that's, you know, sort of a foundational investment that we need to see made so that we can continue to do the exciting stuff that we've all been talking about today and that our 507 plan contemplates. You know, and I think I would just say too that, you know, part of what I want to do when I'm out in the field is to be able to, you know, talk to and say hi to and interact with the DSPs and the folks who are working in our programs, just to, again, express my gratitude. It's, you know, not nearly enough, it's not nearly all that they deserve, but it's the least that, you know, we can do when we're out there is to, you know, acknowledge the work that they're doing. And so we've been trying, you know, very hard as an agency to make sure that we're doing that at every step of the way. So I just referenced in terms of the $1.1 billion from our FMAP investment that is going out and in the process of going out this week and over the next couple of months. You know, we'll be finishing up that investment in the workforce. And then additionally, you know, the ARPA dollars provided us with a lot of exciting opportunity, you know, to make grants, seeking innovation, you know, seeking great ideas from our providers, and then also opportunities to invest in areas that we've been talking about for a long time, like credentialing and other ways that we can support our workforce, not just from a monetary perspective, but from a professional development perspective. And then, of course, the opportunity to conduct evaluations of some of our most important programs and policy questions. And so, obviously, we talked a little bit today about self-direction. There's a lot of conversation around self-direction, and I think that reflects how important a resource it is to the people that we serve. And how many people are choosing to self-direct their services. And, you know, OPWDD, obviously, we very much value the self-direction program. We want to see it, you know, it be a sustainable resource for folks who choose to self-direct. And we also want to see it be an accessible opportunity for individuals who would choose to go that way. And we know now that it can be difficult for folks to navigate. You know, there are processes and red tape in place that can make it difficult. And we also know that a lot of people who self-direct have very active family members who are assisting them in that. And so, you know, one of the things that, you know, the team wants to do with the FMAP dollars and that we're, you know, working on now is to really be able to, you know, conduct a thorough evaluation of our self-direction program. And I think that will absolutely entail, you know, feedback and engagement with folks who are using self-direction and their families, and, you know, the providers who are supporting, you know, the structure of our self-direction program, FIs and support brokers. There has been, you know, an overwhelming amount of feedback about the self-direction program over the last, you know, couple of months. I think especially as we've been talking about doing the evaluation, there's been conversation about whether or not we need to do an evaluation. And I think, you know, concern about making sure that the stakeholders' voices are heard as part of that evaluation. And we are very much committed to meaningful stakeholder engagement around the program and making sure that the program, you know, is evaluated and, you know, designed in such a way that works for the people who are using it, and also helps us to maintain the resource for individuals going forward. You know, sustainability is a really big piece of what we're focused on for self-direction and making sure it continues to be available. So I think there's a great opportunity with self-direction between the large amount of feedback that we're getting from folks who are using the program and the opportunity to conduct an evaluation. Excited to see what some of the results of that are. We talked a little bit about the CCO evaluation that we'll be conducting. Again, another really foundational program. Everybody who accesses our services, or the vast majority of folks who access OPWDD services, do that through the help of a care manager and a CCO. And it really is, you know, it's the foundational service for people to build off of, you know, when they're seeking services and support from our system and our providers. And I think at this point, you know, it's still a very new program. It was, you know, even within its first year, it encountered lots of changes and processes, and then of course went right into COVID. And I think we hear a lot of success about the care management program, and then we hear, a fair amount of people who are dissatisfied. And I think we want to take the opportunity with the federal dollars that we have to, conduct an evaluation of the CCO program. And I think, when I talk about that CCO evaluation, I always make sure to mention that that's not just an evaluation of the CCOs themselves, but also around the rules and the regs and the policies and the guidelines that dictate the CCO program. So it's an internal evaluation of OPWDD and its structures, and an external evaluation of the CCOs themselves. And of course, again, with really meaningful engagement from the CCOs, from the families and the individuals who the CCOs support. So again, another, I think, opportunity there for us to just continue to improve upon the programs that we have out there. And of course, we'll be also studying the continued, sort of policy question around managed care and what direction the agency is and should be moving in around managed care, and really looking at managed care through the lens of our strategic plan and the goals that we have set for ourselves as a system, and looking to see, what's the right mechanism to support that, to support the agency and the system and moving forward to achieve those goals. So another exciting opportunity there. Some of the other grant opportunities, we just released an RFP this week related to housing innovation and seeking opportunities to support our providers and how they're providing residential and housing services. Very much one of the focuses that we have here at the agency is thinking about our continuum of housing supports and how we can best support folks to live as independently as they can and want to in the least restrictive settings possible. And so we've been looking a lot at our non-certified side of the world and thinking about how can we bolster that side of the continuum, which would, of course, make certified opportunities more readily available for those who need it, would take some of the burden off the incredible staffing crisis that we're facing, and again, be most inclusive and most integrated for the people that we're serving, which is for folks who want that, right, the ultimate goal that we have. So, how can we support folks to live as integrated and, be as important parts of their community as possible. So I think we're really excited about that. So there'll be two opportunities, through FMAP going out related to housing. We'll also be looking at integration as it relates to our day programs, opportunities coming out there. I'm sure that I'm missing a couple of the FMAP opportunities, but OSI is on, and if I miss any, they'll talk about it in their presentation. So, I think that in broad brushes, that covers a lot of what's going on, a lot of what is, the focus of our agenda. Oh, technology. That's one of the other pieces of the ARPA funds, how we'll be directing some of our ARPA funds is seeking opportunities, and looking and asking providers to show us the ways that they're using technology, so that we can continue to think about how do we make that part of, how do we make that part of what's, readily available for folks, and the ways that technology can enable independence and help support, and again, take some of the pressure off of the direct support professionals as well. Part of what I've been doing over the course of March is, intentionally looking at programs that are using technology. There's, really incredible ways that technology is being used to support, the individuals that we serve in our system. And I think there are a lot of opportunities, and we're excited to be able to showcase some of that and to have providers show us what they're doing, and for us to be able to support them through some of these grant opportunities as we seek, to make these, sort of more longer term and, tenable, supports for the people that we're serving. So I don't think I'm missing anything in the big picture. I know we have more time scheduled for my presentation, so happy, to take any questions. Nick, I don't know if you have any specific questions or if there's anything I missed from your perspective, but I'll take a breath anyway.
Yeah, no, appreciate that, Commissioner. Great overview. It's an exciting time. I don't think we've ever had such a, such energy that either, in the system, such support from the administration, both from the governor's office and your office. So we're very excited. I do know some of our council members do have some questions or would like to say a few things. So why don't we open it up while we have some time?
Hi, Nick, this is Dan. I just wanted to say that I'm super excited, just follow a little bit on what Nick said about the energy. And it is awesome to be partnering. And what I'll say about that is one of my favorite quotes. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
A good one, Dan.
Nice. That's a good one. Any other comments?
Nick, this is Dan. If nobody else is going to say anything, I do want to reiterate about the FMAP bonuses. We got the money yesterday. We got the transmittal yesterday. I couldn't be any more excited about beginning to distribute that money over the next few weeks. And so thank you very, very much for your work in putting that together.
We're happy to hear that. We're excited for you guys to have the opportunity to get that to your staff.
Yeah, that is
big shout out to Kevin and his team for all the work that they did. I don't know if they're on the call, but it was an incredible amount of work to get everything that they needed in place to make those payments in time. So thanks to them.
Yes, I would echo that. Especially as, you know, for those of us who are parents, we're very much appreciative. We're very much reliant on the DSPs. They have been a phenomenal resource during this very difficult period of the pandemic, and they continue to, as you said, Commissioner, we can't do anything without them, and they make everything happen. So we can make all the best recommendations in the world, but at the end of the day, if we don't have a committed workforce, we can't make it happen. Any other thoughts, comments, questions from the council?
It's Donna. I just want to say this is a very refreshing DDAC meeting. Really feel very hopeful. I've been on the DDAC for a while, and I just, you know, first of all, Carrie, Roger, and Nick, and Michelle. I mean, you've kept it sort of going. There's been so many recommendations made. I think the point to the committee's work, the work has been really hard over the last couple of years, but there's some really good work done, and I'm really hopeful that sort of the whole notion of being self-critical, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way, it's a very positive way of really evaluating a couple of things you said, Carrie, around making sure that things aren't in silos, that everything is looked at in terms of a whole system. And just this idea of sort of taking a hard look at things, and we have a unique opportunity because of the resources this year, and so to really make hay with some of the money we can potentially invest for the future, including obviously a workforce prime, but self-direction, all the things mentioned, housing. So I just feel really good about it. I want to thank you for the overview and also just for the partnership, because I feel we've turned a corner here with the DDAC in terms of it feels like a real partnership going forward, which I think we can really make, as Dan said, you know, we can go far.
Good morning, Commissioner. This is Suzanne Levang. I'm the Director of Community Services for Franklin County and certainly a member of the council. I'm very encouraged by your remarks today and really concur with everyone else that you know, you seem to be very focused and driven in moving the agency forward and working with our families and our providers. I'm curious about what your vision might be in working with OMH and OASIS, and if you could say a bit about you know, in terms of what might be the focus moving forward.
Sure, it's a great question. Thanks for asking it. Yeah, we have great partners, obviously, at OMH and at OASIS, and I would just, you know, add in OCFS as well as another agency that we work, you know, quite a bit with, and are also focused on, you know, continuing to enhance you know, the ways that we support, you know, folks in those systems. And, you know, there's a lot, right? There are a lot of, you know, of individuals in the adult and in the, you know, the youth settings, the youth systems, you know, that have complex needs that, you know, need services from the OMH system, need services from our system, and sometimes get stuck, because they don't fit neatly into one place or another, or because their needs are so complex, that neither one of the systems on their own can really meet those needs, without the help of the other system. And I think, for a long time, our agencies have worked very closely together. I think the staffing crisis has exacerbated, the situation with the complex needs individuals. But we work really closely with them. We're working together on, trying to create, programs and settings that are intentionally meant to serve individuals that have multiple needs. So, a dual diagnosis type of setting and type of, opportunity, whether that be, at an acute care level or transitional or, in a crisis, sort of crisis respite. We have all of those ideas on the table talking through, primarily with OMH, definitely with OASIS as needed, and then also thinking about what are the right interventions, for the same types of individuals, but those who are in the child welfare or the OCFS system, and making sure that, OPWDD is available to assist when individuals have IDD, but also, keeping in mind that the other systems that we work with need to also equip themselves to work with individuals with IDD, right? And I think we have a really important role in helping them, to be equipped. But I think, there's a lot to unpack there in terms of, which system sort of, takes responsibility. I think we're trying to sort of, move away from that idea of, which agency is responsible, and just think about individuals as, New Yorkers who have a need and that we're working together to assist them. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And of course, the Department of Health is really important in that, there's a lot of focus on looking at the Medicaid waivers, making sure that, there's opportunities for integrated, services. And, I think one of the other initiatives that we are undertaking is thinking through an agenda when it comes to having a chief medical officer. We're still sort of thinking about what that looks like, but there's, definitely a lot of conversation around how that, an individual like that can help bring integrated care, to the forefront of what we're doing. One of the other things that we're doing here is our clinical team under Jill Pettinger is also focusing on ways to provide technical assistance and training, especially when it comes to some of these complex cases that, our providers are, encountering now, right, more and more, and wanting to make sure that our providers are really well equipped and that they're really well supported from this agency and from the other agencies when it comes to serving those individuals.
Thank you. Very encouraging.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. And on the point of Chief Medical Officer, Gary, I know your committee had some thoughts on that. I mean, I know there was the question as to what is the role of OPWDD in looking at the physical health needs of the population, because we know many times, in fact, I was just in the START 2 kickoff meeting, and they were talking about how undiagnosed physical issues often drive behavioral issues that then drive the need for more long-term support services, more expensive or less integrated options. And so I know that's been a question of the Health and Wellness Committee, right, Gary?
Absolutely. And we actually have a sketch of a plan that we'd like to discuss with the Commissioner at some point about the integration of the three. And one of the issues that's been occurring is people wind up because they have no place else to go, they wind up in the hospital with a behavioral problem, and then it goes on for a long time. It's very costly, and it's not the appropriate way to treat. So we've got a lot to discuss, and we look forward to meeting with the Commissioner and going through these.
Very good. Any other questions, comments?
As far as the role of the medical director, I think it is something that needs to be looked at. It may not have to be a physician, but it's somebody that can coordinate the care and be involved in managing processes. And that might be the skill set that is necessary. And I think that's a discussion that should take place.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity, and we're really still in concept phase. So look forward, Gary, to talking more. I know you've talked with Roger in the past, and so we can all kind of regroup and we can share some thoughts. And again, we want to make sure that that we're really planful and intentional about what kind of structure we set up when it comes to a medical office or a chief medical officer. So we're not necessarily running headfirst into just hiring a doctor to come and work here, and but really wanting to set up a strategy and a plan of how that individual or group of individuals, whatever it ends up being, can really support the work, right? And I think there's absolutely integration from a primary and physical healthcare, obviously dental being sort of part of that or sub of that, but also psychiatry and other areas where there's a lot of crossover, and wanting to make sure that we're really we have a strong strategy around that.
Great, thank you.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, Commissioner, it's Michelle again. I just wanted to ask if you might be able to speak a little bit to the overview presentation, particularly the part in terms of the collaboration with OPWDD regarding the recommendations from the committees. You're hearing like a snippet of work that's been done. I think the Systems Committee has had years of recommendations, as has some of the others, housing as well, that have gone out to OPWDD without really getting a response. And as I said, we were kind of working prior to your administration with kind of coming up with something that makes sense in terms of a commitment on both ends to kind of working more closely together in regards to that, to make sure that people are getting feedback to that. Does that, I'm just curious if you can speak at all to how you see the role of OPWDD in that, and if you think that you're going to be able to honor that plan that we kind of had in place, that we had sketched out prior to you starting.
Sure. Yeah, I think that you'll find when Allison goes through the 507 overview, and then when you actually get the draft document to review, I think you'll find a lot of the work and the recommendations of the DDAC is really, intertwined and thread throughout the 507 and the document. And I think, there's more conversation to be had, and we should have, perhaps, the executive, DDAC team and then our Office of Strategic Initiatives sort of sit down with Roger and I and talk about how we make sure that the work is aligned. I think that the more, obviously, that the group, the group of professionals and family members and self-advocates that are on the DDAC are incredibly committed, come with a wealth of information, and have a lot to contribute to the work that we're all trying to do moving forward. And so I think it's really important that we, figure out the way to make sure that that work gets incorporated into the strategic work that we're doing at the agency. Again, so that we're not sort of, we don't have the DDAC over here doing this work and then us over here doing that work, and hopefully it overlaps somewhere, right? I think that would be such an incredible waste of energy and resources, but really making sure that we're, moving in the same direction. Obviously, that doesn't mean that we're one entity, right? There will still be, independent, right? And you have obviously your, legislative and statutory requirements and recommendations that you should make independently of what we're working on. But I think to the extent that we can have that work lined up with our 507 plan and the process for stakeholder engagement and the process to bring, information in and, to use the feedback loops that we're trying to establish as part of our strategic planning, I think the more we can get in line there, the better it is, and the more success we'll see, and seeing everybody's recommendations as part of final products, and then ultimately coming to fruition as changes to our system. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and I do think that it's probably worth a side conversation. I know OSI is here on this meeting and listening. They've been reviewing the recommendations. And like I said, I think you're going to see a lot of your thoughts woven throughout what the strategic plan looks like, but then we'll have to figure out the way to move forward as part of a regular, stakeholder engagement.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just as a little bit of a follow-up in some of the conversations, that are had between members, one of the things that people have said to me, and I just think it's important to say, is that I'm a stakeholder on other groups as well, and stakeholder engagement is important. And I'm very happy that you're valuing that and working on it. But the DDAC is not just a stakeholder engagement group. It's legislatively, required as an advisory committee. So I just think it's important to say that it's the DDAC has a little bit of a different role than some of the other, groups that come together that are equally as committed, obviously, to the outcomes in OPWDD systems. But this group has a bit of a different, a different role that's legislatively defined.
Yep, I totally get that. I still think it's really important that it fits into the ongoing work of the agency so that it has, that the voice is being heard in the right place with the right people and getting integrated into the right work products and documents and things like that. So I totally understand the difference. I just want to make sure that we're aligning the processes in the right way so that nothing gets, so that they're not working at cross purposes, so that we're not, we don't have, an unmanageable amount of goals or agendas, and that, because I think ultimately with, minor tweaks here or there, we're kind of all articulating the same places that we want to go as a system.
Yeah, and that point's very much appreciated, and we want to work with you on that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would add, Commissioner, I think the plan to have the executive committee meet with Allison, you and Roger, I think is a good start. We want to align ourselves. Again, the committee structure was something that was developed several years ago. We do think it's an effective way for the council to operate. We have focused on the areas that we outlined earlier, but that doesn't always mean that those are the right areas or that they have the right focus. So we can certainly look at how do we manage ourselves and organize ourselves in a way that best provides you with the input that you need.
So Nick, just on that point, one of the things that we're looking at, and we have the benefit of having had the 507 presentation prior to this conversation, but there's actually a pretty strong alignment between the topical areas of focus and the committee structures and it's not surprising, right? You would think that there would be alignment, right? So what we'd like to do maybe is take a look, once you have the benefit of the presentation around the 507 draft, and then, ultimately, obviously, the actual draft, for you all to think about the committee structures that you have, for us to give some thought to the alignment, right? So obviously, there are going to be recommendations around housing and residential services that, one can easily align with the residential subcommittee, et cetera. And then think about, let's get together maybe with the executive committee if that's the right structure in mid-April, to say, okay, how do we integrate this so that there's meaningful contribution and review? So does for example, residential subcommittee take a harder look at those recommendations in the draft report around residential, et cetera? And do there need to be maybe a little bit of a realignment of committees if you say, well, gee, we don't really have folks who have a focus on topic X. So I think we can benefit from having actually that outline to kind of create the alignment that Commissioner and you have discussed.
Great, wonderful. Well, I think that's a great segue to.
Can I add something out here, please?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Commissioner, thank you for that sort of So we are really excited to work with you. So thank you for that. One of the things that just to add to what Michelle and Nicholas has been talking about is that sometimes, and especially I'll take the example of the 507. I'm a newcomer, firstly, I'm not an old. So just to say, when we were working on the 507 plan, we were looking at, one of the things, and I think you highlighted upon that there will be a feedback loop, and we highlighted that also, that we needed a feedback loop. Together with that, if you can give us some more data on that, say, for example, I think Roger, and we talked about it in the past, Roger had directed us to the website on what is being disclosed. Now, the data out there for any feedback is so at a very high level that we are not able to find out which are the places that it has been spent on or been forecasted on. So if you could get us some more granular data as to talk about if we are planning for something, we need that feedback loop. Absolutely. With the feedback loop, we need get as much as legally allowable. I don't know how much it is that is confidential and we're not allowed to see, to give us some more granular data, but that because the data that was, at least the link that was shown to us, was very, very high level abstraction, which does not give us the real visibility of firstly, the feedback loop, whether what we are suggesting is makes sense. So that's just, I wanted to add on to that. Thank you.
Yeah, and perhaps I can try to address that. So in our last year, we released what we thought would be a very helpful set of data. It was data that had not been previously, made available. It's really aggregate, Medicaid utilization data, which for us is kind of the gold star because it's accurate. It's about people receiving services, and also relates obviously to spending, which is also an important component of evaluation. So what we hope to do on an annual basis is improve what we're releasing. So as we get stakeholder feedback, as we get feedback from the DDAC and says, well, and so the more specificity, the better in a lot of ways, right? So we're hoping that, as you will see the draft plan as it comes out, it's reliant upon data that's otherwise been made publicly available. So if we get the feedback from you or from the DDAC or from others that says, well, yes, but it would be really, really helpful if we had data set X or data set Y with more detail or whatever it is. Some of those may not be disclosable, as you suggest. Obviously, specific client data is not disclosable. But if it's within the realm of disclosable, and sometimes people would like data that is, we'd love to have it too. We just don't happen to actually collect that data. So then there's a data collection project. So what we would be looking for is feedback, and we've made a commitment to, on an annual basis, make available, and continue to improve that data set that we're making available. And going back to the prior question, I think from local government, from counties, the same data that we're making available publicly is the data we make available to the counties, because they play an important role. I think, Michelle, you highlighted it maybe in your initial presentation in providing their recommendations, and so they get county level data. So we're really trying to align all of those things, and as you said, to create a feedback loop. So I would recommend, if you have very specific suggestions that you want to bring to the DDAC, I don't know, maybe the systems subcommittee, I'm not sure exactly, Nick and Michelle, but that we would be really, really interested in understanding what additional data would be helpful.
Okay.
If it's aligned with the committees, that will be much better. When the committees are putting in effort, so if that is what we can sort of see it at that level, that'll be really great. That's what my suggestion is.
Perfect. Yes, thank you, Sumantra. Excellent point. Okay, with that, we talked about the 507. That'll be our next agenda item, and I believe, Allison, you're going to be presenting it, but I think we had scheduled at least a break here. I know we've been sitting for 2 hours. We scheduled 30 minutes. I know it's only 11 o'clock. Do we want to stick to a 30-minute schedule? Am I seeing head shake?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay, so we will start up again at 11:30. I would suggest you just keep your sessions active and just put yourself on mute and stop your video. And we'll start up at 11:30 with our 507 plan from Allison. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks, we'll just give a minute for everybody to join us. See screens turning on and people coming back to their desks. Let's give it one more minute. All right, well, let's start back up with the March 25th, 2022 DDAC meeting in our afternoon, or our second part of our agenda. With much anticipation, we are joined today by Allison McCarthy, who's going to be reviewing the 507 draft plan. Allison, thank you for joining us.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Sorry about that croak. Super happy to be here on behalf of the Office of Strategic Initiatives. My team has been working to develop this document, and the version that we're sharing with you all today is a little bit more extended than the previous version shared with stakeholders. As the legislatively mandated advisory group to OPWD, we wanted to really provide a little bit more detail and provide an opportunity to drill down a bit more into the specific areas of work that are outlined in our strategic plan. Before doing so, I just want to touch on, some of the comments that I think the commissioner and others on the committee had pointed to earlier today. The Office for Strategic Initiatives is really, a commitment to stakeholders that, as we begun last summer, last spring with a set of forums, an opportunity to really formally engage, to listen, to hear, and establish collective goals and objectives for OPWD and our service system. So that's, I think to the credit of Roger and Carrie, who really, even in her time at Chamber, Carrie was able to identify the need for that formal process for us to take seriously the feedback loop that was mentioned. We receive information and input from stakeholders and are able to formally communicate that back to you all and confirm that we got it right. And also to continue that loop by sharing data, by expanding that data collection and analysis and communicating on an ongoing basis over time. So what we're looking at here is really a collective story, a collective roadmap for where we're going as a system. Obviously, as Donna had noted, it's a super exciting time because we do have resources, and resources are being invested through ARPA, through the budget, hopefully, and it's a unique opportunity that, I think we're super excited about here in Strategic Initiatives, and we're excited about our role to engage with you on a consistent, on a cyclical basis, to engage and talk through and confirm that roadmap for the future. I think it's also exciting to see your formal recommendations that were shared this morning with me. And now we have the opportunity as the office to, connect the dots between what we've established in our strategic plan, what you are recommending, and I'm seeing a lot of connections, which is a great thing to see and a great start to this conversation. Today, I'm going to actually hand it over to Jessica Pigeon, who comes to us from the Developmental Disabilities Planning Council. She has 8 years experience in developing strategic planning processes and strategic plans. She comes to us with a lot of experience. So our office is super excited to have Jess at the table to share and communicate what I think is clear, concise goals and objectives, and to drill down a little bit more in terms of what those projects within those goals and objectives look like. Again, I think the recommendations that you all shared, you'll see throughout. And where we might not have perfect alignment, this is a process for identifying those and identifying where on the roadmap we can, include and think about how to address those challenges. I will say, in some cases, and as Carrie had mentioned earlier, when we're partnering with our key stakeholders like the Office for Mental Health, OASIS, OCFS, that does take time. It takes collaboration. It takes the opportunity to build the relationship and to set forth that similar type of roadmap. So, you know, things will be sequenced and prioritized in a way that recognize those, the need for time and the need to develop relationships. And that's the information we're looking forward to being able to share. Here's where things fit in our priority list, and here's the plan for addressing all of the important recommendations made by you all. So with that, I'm actually gonna let Jess jump into the presentation, the formal presentation, and we'll be happy to discuss and engage following with any questions.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you all for having me here this afternoon. We do have a PowerPoint that Josie's gonna pull up to go through some of the framework that that Allison just talked about and the Commissioner talked about this morning. Thank you, Josie. So my presentation today will include a few different things. It will include a brief overview of some of the 507 stakeholder input we received by OPWDD. You'll also see that a lot of the recommendations that you provided, as has been mentioned, are included in the presentation and throughout the 507 plan. I'll also present on our proposed goals and objectives for the next 5 years. I'll give some examples of some specific activities and projects that are either currently underway or planned to help meet the proposed goals and objectives in the next few years. I'll talk about a larger vision for how we plan to use our 507 goals and objectives to inform long-term planning. And then I'll briefly talk about some immediate next steps, so what's happening in the next few months regarding the 507. As Allison noted, there will be time left at the end for any questions you may have. Next slide, please, Josie. So first I'll go through very briefly some stakeholder and DDAC input that was received, you know, in the process. So as has already been talked about, to prepare for the 2023 to 2027 strategic plan, also 507 plan, we invited input from a lot of different stakeholders, including self-advocates, family members, organizations, providers, etc., back in the spring and summer of 2021. Input was provided through 5 different regional public hearings, which had over 100 speakers. We also had meetings and input provided from over 30 different stakeholder groups. These were self-advocacy groups, family organizations, provider organizations, some DD councils, and also representatives from underrepresented groups. Lastly, we received email comments from over 150 stakeholders, in addition to some of those other venues. Alongside that, we have the recommendations that your committees provided to us as well, over the last few months and years. And I know that many of you participated and provided input throughout a lot of these different venues. So I just want to take the time to thank you for participating and sharing your thoughts and concerns and ideas with us. Hopefully, as we've mentioned, you'll see a lot of them sprinkled throughout the 507 plan and the full draft once you have access to that in the next few weeks, actually, in the next month, I'll say. Next slide, please. So from all of that stakeholder input that we received, there were some key priorities that were identified, many of which will probably not be that surprising to you because they aligned very nicely with the recommendations that you guys provided. So the first is to address the DSP workforce crisis. The second is to improve self-direction, looking at how we can improve housing supports and services, supporting people with more complex needs better, improving OPWDD's use of data and its transparency with stakeholders of our data, and then supporting research of programs and services. There's also, this is just the high level list of priorities that were identified, over the different opportunities that we provided to receive that input. There were additional categories and priorities that were also shared with us, like employment, children's services, health, and improving access to supports for those who are from underserved communities. Next slide. As I mentioned, in addition to those other avenues of stakeholder input, we did also receive input from you all, as you've shared with us again today. There was a lot of recommendations around housing, including navigation, subsidies, property, non-certified, taking a better look at non-certified options, looking at self-direction and the administration of the model and the complexity of it, looking at health, task force, having a potential task force, health and safety trainings, and then again, some more information and suggestions around data sharing and process evaluation and looking at our systems. Next slide. So based on the stakeholder engagement that was received, a review of our state data and national data, and your recommendations from DDAC, OPWDD drafted the following proposed goals and objectives for its 2023 to 2027 strategic plan. Next slide. So the first overarching goal is to support people in the most person-centered ways. The second goal is to promote practices that strengthen the workforce and infrastructure. And the third goal is to advance systems change and innovation across the state. Next slide. OPWDD's vision places people with developmental disabilities at the center of the system of services and supports that we provide. We really believe that the focus of these three goals align with that vision and mission and will help us move the system further toward helping people with developmental disabilities experience a richer life. Next slide. So as noted, goal 1 will focus on supporting people in the most person-centered and holistic ways possible. To do this, OPWDD will improve supports and services for people with developmental disabilities throughout their lifespan by addressing gaps in services and ensuring supports are focused on individual need, offer choice, maximize independence, and increase community integration and participation. We have 4 different objectives that we're hoping will help us meet this goal. The first is focused on community integration and participation. We're looking to increase opportunities for community integration and participation, supports that facilitate self-determination, and activities that improve social determinants of health. Objective 1.2 will focus on children, youth, and young adults with disabilities. We're hoping to ensure children, youth, and young adults receive appropriate and coordinated services within the context of school, family, and the community. Objective 1.3 focuses on those that have complex needs. We're hoping to expand and improve services targeted for people with complex support needs, including residential and crisis services and behavioral supports. Lastly, under Goal 1 is Objective 1.4, where we're focused on identifying and addressing gaps in services and supports that meet the needs of underserved, culturally and ethnically diverse communities. Next slide, please. Goal 2 focuses on advancing the OPWDD system by investing in the workforce, updating the system to better support service delivery, and increasing access to information. Objective 2.1 hopes to improve recruitment, retention, and the quality of the direct support and disability workforce. Objective 2.2 looks to advance technology and our information infrastructure and explore approaches to increase the availability and timeliness of data to support decision-making, monitor performance, and assess the quality of services. And Objective 2.3 is focused on continuing to promote opportunities for stakeholders to inform our decision-making. Next slide. Lastly, OPWDD is interested in exploring new approaches and opportunities that advance the system, reduce complexity, and improve responsiveness. To meet this goal, OPWDD plans to strengthen the quality, equity, and effectiveness of our supports, including the self-direction model, competitive integrated employment services, the continuum of housing and residential options, and care management services. Objective 3.2 focuses on regulatory and policy changes. We're hoping to increase opportunities to explore and implement regulatory and policy changes that support greater flexibility and incentivize improved personal outcomes. And Objective 3.3 is focused on research and innovation. We want to prioritize innovation by evaluating programs, conducting research, and developing opportunities to test new approaches to service delivery across the state of New York. Next slide. To help meet the goals and objectives we've outlined, OPWDD has several activities and projects already underway or planned for the next few years, many of which you've actually heard about already on the call today, but I'll go over some of them again and add a few additional. I'm going to provide a very high-level overview of some of these activities. The full draft, which will be released, has more information in detail and additional activities that I'm not going to touch on today. So you'll see a lot more information in that full document. Next slide. Excuse me. So to help us meet our objective around community integration, we have a number of different activities taking place. The first is planned towards supporting and improving day services and employment services across the system. OPWDD is investing up to $30 million in American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA funds, to improve access to innovative, integrated, and person-centered day and employment alternatives to traditional site-based day services. We're looking to hopefully help expand the capacity of providers to provide these type of opportunities. The goal of this initiative is to increase OPWDD's delivery of HCBS waiver day and employment services in the broader community. When it comes to technology, we know that experiences prior to and during the COVID pandemic really suggest that when used appropriately, remote supports can result in greater satisfaction and reduced costs without compromising individual health and safety. So based on that, as a first step, we're hoping to improve access to technology by using a small portion of the ARPA funds to streamline and improve the process used for people with DD to access assistive technology and make needed modifications to their homes and vehicles. Some stakeholders have noted that the process can be lengthy, burdensome, and confusing. So we're evaluating the program's current processes with the expectation that we'll receive recommendations that can inform future efforts to simplify that process, expand the availability of the service, and improve overall user experience and engagement with that program. Additionally, we'll fund creation and implementation of training that outlines key aspects of that program. The training will be targeted towards service providers, care coordination, organizations, clinicians, and OPWDD staff, so more people are aware of the program and understand how to access it and utilize it. In addition to that, we're also really interested in exploring other opportunities and avenues for people to be able to access assistive and enabling technologies and remote supports. We know that that can help people to live more independently and can facilitate more efficient use of scarce staffing resources. So we're really interested in understanding some other opportunities to use technology in the future. Lastly, we're supporting legislation currently that would allow supported decision-making agreements to be legally recognized in New York State. We're also using a portion of our agency's ARPA funding to further test a facilitation model that was previously tested under DDPC funding that will support people in making their own decisions, educate stakeholders on the model, and strengthen supported decision-making principles within the OPWDD service system as a whole. Next slide. When it comes to children, youth, and young adults, we're currently looking at examining the different types of services that children and youth are accessing in our system. We want to make sure that they're effectively coordinated with other available resources. So we're going to review and examine whether the services and supports are children centered, if they are home and community based, developmentally and age appropriate, and make sure that they're designed and delivered within the context of the family in the best ways possible. We're also going to review and look at different innovative and improvements within the service design that we have that may result in future waiver reform, specifically related to children. In addition to that, as was mentioned previously by the commissioner, we're doing an evaluation of the CCO model. As part of that evaluation, we're planning to look at children within that model and make sure that there's quality improvements in care management for people with IDD, including children, that are taking place, and that model is doing what it's supposed to be doing and best supporting children too. Lastly, we already have activities underway and are continuing to evaluate other ones to participate in, where we want to expand, access to children's crisis services and also expand those cross-systems relationships, which has kind of been talked about a little bit today already. We're working with the Office of Mental Health on a number of different initiatives, including making sure there's available children's crisis services. There's a development of a specialized multidisciplinary inpatient psychiatric unit for specific individuals and children. We also have another program I'll be talking about on the next slide that allows children age 6 and older experiencing crisis to access crisis services. Next slide. So I just mentioned another program that we're doing that supports children and also supports adults is our CSIDD expansion. So we already have CSIDD. Some of you might be familiar with it across certain portions of the state. OPWDD has implemented this crisis services for individuals with intellectual and/or developmental disabilities, the CSIDD acronym. It's following or based on the START model, which you might be more familiar with that name. CSIDD provides high intensity services for people who experience frequent hospitalizations, crisis visits. They might use mobile emergency services often, and are at risk of losing placement or other community services. So OPWDD will soon have an actual complete network of CSIDD providers across the entire state through a recent initiative in ARPA funding. We're also participating in a statewide partnership facilitated by OMH to ensure that access to the crisis services for people with DD who may contact the newly mandated federal 988 crisis hotline. They have access to that information and it's accessible to them. In addition, we're using some funding, some ARPA funding to collaborate with the Conference of Local Mental Hygiene Directors to identify gaps in the current mobile crisis response system and propose solutions to address those gaps. We're working with the counties to pilot interventions that improve mobile crisis response in children's services. OPWDD has also worked to identify people with lower acuity needs who are receiving state-operated services who might benefit from residential opportunities provided by nonprofit agencies and offer them opportunities to transition to a home that may better suit their needs and desires. OPWDD State Operations is also exploring new models for providing services to people who currently receive intensive supports and require intermediate transitional residential support prior to long-term residential settings. And lastly, OPWDD is looking to make permanent the rate increase for intensive behavioral services, which is a fee-for-service HCBS waiver service designed for people who are currently living independently and are presenting highly challenging behaviors that put them at imminent risk for placement into a more restrictive residential setting. We've implemented this through an emergency waiver amendment, and we're looking at a permanent rate increase, which will continue to enhance access to short-term outcome-oriented services that are focused on developing effective behavioral strategies to ensure health and safety and or improve quality of life. Next slide. When it comes to making sure we're best serving culturally and ethnically diverse communities, OPWDD is establishing a separate Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. We're currently recruiting a Chief Diversity Officer to drive organizational change through that office, and they'll also examine our current OPWDD policies, workforce, and equity practices. We're also planning to continue to build on existing initiatives that we have underway, including the Ramirez June Developmental Disabilities Navigator Initiative, a collaboration between DDPC and the New York State Office for New Americans and OPWDD. And we're continuing our 2-year Ensuring Access grant through the DDPC to address equity and access to the service system for Chinese American and Spanish-speaking communities, with the hopes that hopefully we can increase access to information about OPWDD services and supports through a targeted campaign specifically to those who speak Spanish or Chinese. In addition, we're planning to invest up to $30 million of our ARPA funds for nonprofit service providers, local government authorities, and institutions of higher education to make recommendations and assist with modifying internal and external policies and programs that impact equity, diversity, inclusion, language access, and cultural competency within our system. Lastly, starting in 2021, OPWDD trained all of our agency executive leadership using the State Civil Service Office of Diversity Inclusion Management's implicit bias training. We plan to continue to expand that training to multiple other levels of staff within the agency. Next slide. When it comes to workforce, which is obviously a key priority area and that's come up again already today, we are distributing COVID longevity and retention bonuses. It sounds like some folks on the call have already received that, so that's great to hear. In addition to that funding, we also are looking to fund other workforce recruitment and development grants. We have projects around credentialing. We have projects that would work to implement retention initiatives to improve the overall workforce, to test different data-driven strategies for recruitment, including efforts that incorporate the perspective of the DSP workforce and the people they support within those initiatives. Additionally, we're collaborating with a lot of external entities, including BOCES on a DSP pilot program for high school students in the Capital Region. We're working with SUNY to offer unique DSP immersion courses throughout the SUNY system. We're partnering with the Department of Labor and regional one-stop centers to increase the DSP workforce. And we're also promoting the creation of a DSP code by the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics, which would help allow for improved data collection and research on the DSP workforce, which we think would be very helpful. When it comes to data access and transparency, we're in partnership with the New York State Office of Information Technology Services. We're moving forward with some different plans to transition the agency's technology to more innovative, intuitive programs. We're also looking to consolidate some systems as appropriate, streamline different workflows, and upgrade capacity and staff skill sets related to technology and data systems. Additionally, we'll be identifying information to make available to the public as part of our annual ongoing planning process, as Roger kind of spoke about earlier, and we'll be keeping keeping with transparency policies, we'll be, sharing a lot of different data in the coming years. Part of this effort will also include the creation of a data community of practice to gather further stakeholder input on what data points would be most helpful internally for us and externally for planning purposes. And then we've recently released 5 years worth of Medicaid data. You can find it on our website. You can also see some additional data in the draft 507. We plan to continue to do that. We'll be making additional data available as we receive it in the coming years as well. Next slide, please. When it comes to stakeholder engagement input, and this has been touched on a little bit already today, we're really interested in finding ways to continue to facilitate and participate in, external stakeholder conversations and work groups. We want to make sure that as we're doing that, we're doing it in the most productive, meaningful way possible, and we're having, really worthwhile conversations and able to have that feedback loop that was previously talked about. So we already have a number of different regularly scheduled conversations with a variety of different groups representing self-advocates, parents, provider agencies and associations, CCOs. So we'll continue to have those, but we are looking at different ways to potentially structure those agendas and think about how to best move the system forward together as a team. We also are committed to continuing to participate in a variety of different cross-system and interagency groups. You'll see a list of them in the 507. I'm not going to go over all of them here. That's also just a very small portion of the number that we participate in. We have staff on a variety of different cross-system and agency groups. Overall, we just wanted to highlight that OPWDD is committed to continuing to engage our stakeholders and other state agencies throughout the duration of the 5-year period in ongoing ways, whether that's stakeholder meetings, project-specific advisory groups, agency presentations and forums. We're really looking at a variety of different means to make sure that we're all working together to achieve future and shared goals. This includes working with you all on DDAC and your committees to help inform our long-term planning and the framing of the larger conversations around the systems of supports and services within the agency and also externally with our other stakeholder groups. So we plan to continue to explore this, which we've kind of already talked about. And, I look forward to having that conversation as part of OSI with you all at DDAC to see how that, what makes the most sense and how we can continue to work together and strengthen that relationship. Next slide. So this has already been touched on, so I'll go over it, kind of briefly, but we are looking to evaluate our self-direction using ARPA funds. In addition to looking at self-direction under Objective 3.1, we have a really big focus on our housing work. And I know you have a housing committee on DDAC, so I think you'll see a lot of the recommendations you've provided are spoke to throughout the 507 draft, but also within this objective specifically. So as was already mentioned, we're planning to use ARPA funds for 2 pretty large projects that will encourage additional innovation and flexibility in housing supports. The funds will support strategies to enhance person-centered service delivery, to further incentivize the provision of supports and services for people seeking to move from their family home, with a priority of those living with aging caregivers or from congregate settings into private housing. We're also going to invest in additional opportunities to incentivize providers to expand the use of innovative technologies and to develop housing options and staffing models that expand supportive housing and family care options. In addition to that, we really think that the use of these ARPA funds can help inform future waiver reform including the development of services to support people transitioning to more integrated settings, and with a focus on non-certified, a little bit more of a focus on non-certified settings than maybe you've seen previously. We're also interested in continuing to learn about the results of other externally funded projects or pilots and evaluations that we know are happening around the state, including some of the work of the DDPC, some of the work of different USAIDs and provider agencies and organizations. So we're going to continue to build our relationships and make sure we're informed about those happenings and projects to help inform our larger system of supports and reform within our system related to housing. We're also considering a redesign of the supportive residential habilitation rate, which will allow people with a wider range of needs to live in more independent settings with a mixture of in-person and on-call services from provider agencies. A new approach like this to rate setting will tier payments based on a person's need for supports and recognize that the provider's costs will include direct staffing, efficient flexibility combinations of on-call staffing, smart home technology, and use of staffing arrangements like paid neighbors. Lastly, as been mentioned, we're going to engage an external consultant to perform a program evaluation that will help us shape and inform the continuous quality improvement strategy for our care management services. The program evaluation will help inform how to best improve the quality of care management services and OPWDD policies and systems that support it, with the goal of improving outcomes for all who receive care management services. Next slide. In addition, we're restructuring our oversight activities to align with a provider's history of quality and compliance. We're also, speaking of stakeholder engagement, we also have created a work group to identify other opportunities to streamline, our reform, our policies, our regulations. So we've started to convene a work group that will include people with disabilities, parents, providers, and advocates. And this work group will focus on a variety of different topics, some of which include streamlining our training, creating a more efficient method of conducting employee background checks, looking at, revising different evaluation documents, using technology and innovative services to support people in less restrictive settings, and reviewing incident management and the definitions of abuse and neglect, among a variety of other things. And I think some of this work will also speak to some of the recommendations that were previously provided around the front door from DDAC. Next slide. Lastly, as if all of that wasn't enough, and again, that's just some of the activities that's happening here at OPWDD. We also have some ideas under our Objective 3.3 for how to do additional research and innovation for our system. So we'll be investing a portion of our ARPA funding to study managed care, as the commissioner has already talked about. We're also going to use some ARPA funds, as I mentioned, to undertake several different program evaluations. So that's the self-direction, care coordination, managed care, like I just said. We're going to look at other opportunities to evaluate other OPWDD programs and services. We really want to make sure that we're focused on collecting data, analyzing statistical trends, using the information that we gather through these different evaluations to really help inform and support effective decision-making when it comes to our supports and services and future policy reforms. And we're going to look at developing and implementing social and policy research initiatives that explore promising practices across the state, nation, and globally to ensure that the services and supports that we're providing are the most effective in meeting and the intended goals and outcomes that we're trying to meet. So this will include enhancing our collaborations with academic and research institutions, participating in communities of practice and learning collaboratives at the national level and in the state level, and engaging and learning from other leaders in the field of developmental disabilities. Next slide. So again, those are just a few activities. When you see the draft, you'll see, a number of other ones under each of those different objectives. When it comes to long-term planning, next slide, please. We really think that the goals and objectives that we've outlined here and in the 2023 to 2027 strategic plan will provide a roadmap for first stabilizing the service system in the short term, but then also laying out important research, evaluation, and innovation activities that will inform ongoing system improvement in the long term. We think that the 507 plan will assist OPWDD and stakeholders to work together to achieve a clear and planned progress and clear and planned waiver and systems reforms that everybody is aware of. We hope that it will help us move toward a more person-centered, sustainable, equitable, and coordinated system of services and supports for all New Yorkers with developmental disabilities that access OPWDD services. Next slide. So the immediate next steps, next slide, please. Thank you, Josie. The immediate next steps of the process include the release of the full draft in April, which the Commissioner had previously noted and Allison also noted. We will be holding public hearings in June to collect additional stakeholder feedback on this proposed structure of goals and objectives that I've outlined here today. We're also considering some additional opportunities to engage stakeholders and regionally through online formats, et cetera. We want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to engage the draft and provide their feedback and input before we finalize that document. Based on that input, we'll make updates and needed revisions to the actual document, and then we'll be presenting the new revisions information and the changes to you, DDAC, in August or September, depending on the timing of the meeting, per the role that you mentioned earlier, Michelle, and the 507 language around your advisory capacity with the 507 itself. Once we have done that, fingers crossed, everything working together, we'll be submitting a final, 507 plan to the legislature in November and publicly releasing that document. And I will say with the draft and the full document, the document is a bit lengthier. We have some additional materials that are being created to make sure there's some accessible versions or shorter versions of the information that we're sharing so that the information is accessible to anybody who's interested in reading it or seeing it. And it'll be translated too. Next slide. So that's it from my end. I do want to provide an opportunity for the Commissioner or Allison to add anything that I might have forgotten or, clarify anything that I might have said throughout the presentation before opening it up fully for questions.
Nope. Thank you so much, Jessica. I know it's a lot to consume. So this is just the first of many opportunities, and obviously the full document will be coming. We encourage all of you to review that full version so you can really develop, I think, your thoughts and ideas and recommendations for what you're going to share back with us. We absolutely look forward to your input and, hope this early view was helpful for all of you, but we're happy to take questions and have a dialogue.
Jessica, it's Susan Hetherington. It's nice to see you again.
You too. I hope retirement's treating you well, Susan.
Well, I wish. I'm only partly retired, but
fair enough.
At any rate, as you know, employment is my passion, and you talked about evaluation projects that you will be undertaking. And I'm curious whether evaluation of employment and pre-employment programs will be part of that.
So this is Allison. Just to address your question, we do have a FMAP grant that is looking for providers to expand their capacity for employment and day services. That's a first step for us to really try to strengthen our provider capacity and really fund startup and technology resources to focus and encourage our providers to support this incredibly important initiative. I think historically we haven't always had that, clear goal of really the full continuum of day supports needs to be in every provider's pocket, whether it's, certified day, community integration, community rehabilitation, and really moving towards the goal of employment as much as possible for all. So, I can ask of you if you want to weigh in any further, but I think, our first focus is that grant opportunity and really learning and engaging with stakeholders on that opportunity to inform our future, design and structure. But Abiba, please weigh in.
Allison, I would just simply add that we also have the employment state of the state, where we will be looking to increase employment outcomes for individuals with IDD, and certainly, within the work that will be playing out there and looking at specific outcomes, we'll also be looking at the barriers, and we'll be looking at our supported employment ADM, in addition to some of the pre-employment programs and training opportunities for individuals as well.
Thank you, Abiba and Jessica and Allison. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Susan, it's Carrie. I would just add one more thing. In addition to what Abiba and Allison and Jessica said, the governor is also very focused, right, on employment opportunities. It was one of the first things that she mentioned to me when she and I were talking about me taking on this role. And so I think, right, you see it reflected in the State of the State initiative and in the additional dollars. But also, I didn't mention, I should have while I was talking earlier, the Chief Disability Officer is another, really strong step that the governor has taken around policy issues related to people with disabilities, all types of disabilities. And I think one of the first things that Kim will be focusing on is, issues related to employment for people with disabilities. The governor has set a goal of making New York State a model employer, and to provide, to being able to provide, a toolkit of sorts to other governmental entities who are looking to, do better when it comes to hiring individuals with disabilities. So I think between what we're working on here, what Kim's going to be working on from a cross-agency policy perspective, and the governor's support, I think there's a lot of, good energy behind employment opportunities.
That's great to hear. Thank you so much.
So this is Donna. Hi, can you hear me? I never know.
Hi, Donna. Yes.
Jessica, thank you. Hi, Allison. How have you been? So I think it's a great, thanks for the presentation. There's a lot of meat here, a lot of increased options and opportunities, and this will all take time. But the one question I have is around access and assessment, because we sometimes, as we begin to increase opportunity, I've seen in other systems where the best laid plans in terms of developing options and opportunities, sometimes we leave out the sort of easy access and flexibility and assessment piece of it. And while I know it's implicitly stated in the plan, and I think, Jessica, you mentioned the front door in the regulatory segment, but I'm just wondering out loud if we need to put more emphasis on how we're going to improve access and assessment, so that the frustration of accessing services, and I've seen this in the OMH system where we've had to revise the access points, even though the idea of HCBS was wonderful, but nobody could access it because there was so many hoops. So they've been reworking a lot of that stuff. And I just trying to preempt some of that in terms of how would we lay that out in the plans so that we don't ignore the access piece as we begin to develop different opportunities and options.
Sure, I think, Donna, it's a great point. I think, we can certainly take your input back and strengthen the plan in that area, but I'll let others like Abiba weigh in. I think there are, areas that we're working on addressing this, and I think it falls into some of our, DEI efforts, as well as our, transparency and, as you mentioned, regulatory flexibilities and strengthening. So thanks for sharing that. I think it's a good call out.
Allison, I guess I would add that, I'm sorry, Nick, I guess I would also add that we had previously received a set of recommendations from this group, from the systems group, as well as from the family support stakeholder committee on improvements related to the front door, and have been actively working on those points. And Donna, they speak specifically to the accessibility and access issues that you're raising. And we can certainly, as we work through the 507 strategies, make sure that that's well represented, and certainly highlight, some of the additional concerns that we continue to hear, and look at how we can improve those as well.
Yeah, in Abiba, I would add that I think the CCOs, their enrollment experts could be a resource as well because they do see the issue that Donna just cited. Question for you. I know we have an emphasis on employment. Do we also have an emphasis, is it possible as part of the employment picture to actually look at individuals with disabilities actually having their own business and having the opportunity or some level of standing similar to what you see with MBE and WBE? I don't know if that's controlled at a state level, but we do have a lot of people who I know through their self-direction plans and person-centered planning have expressed an interest in starting their own business. And employment may not be for everybody, but again, we talk about having people meaningfully engaged in the community and participating fully in our society. And that's something that a lot of people have expressed interest in. So I just wanted to, recognize that.
Okay, thank you, Nick. We'll certainly take that back.
Can I just jump in for a minute? That
Sure.
is something that actually the DDPC, we are working on a proposal now. We'll be presenting that to our council at the next meeting in June to provide training to parents and people with disabilities around starting their own business. So we are working on that at the DDPC.
That's great, Vicki. And again, given some of the historic barriers for people with IDD to really participate in owning and running a business, I still think that, they should be considered for some status like an MBE, WBE.
Nick, if you don't mind, I just wanted to say, since Vicki, you chimed in, I think one of the things and one of the partnerships we've really been trying to strengthen is our work with DDPC. I think we have a great example of it where, several years ago, DDPC did fund a pilot program around supported decision-making, which proved to be very successful. That program then has led to the drafting of legislation that, that has now passed one of the houses, and the ARPA funds being dedicated to sustaining that pilot. So, we're really excited about the ability to benefit from the innovation that DDPC supplies through its grant making, and then to kind of test out approaches that can then potentially be manifested in larger service delivery reforms. So I just wanted to give a shout out to our work there, and our OSI team are representing the agency with DDPC to kind of strengthen that collaboration. So thanks for that, Vicki.
Absolutely.
If I could just jump in.
Go ahead.
Jump in for a second. DDPC also funded a number of programs for the dental task force over the years in conjunction with OPWDD, and that was a great collaboration, and I'd like to see it continue. And it sounds like in the plan, there is room under some general language for items such as dealing with this operating room crisis that we have now, the 2-year waiting times, 1 to 2 year waiting times to get in. And I would think that would fit under some aspect of priority in that plan. Am I reading that correctly, or should we be more specific in need at this point?
I think I'll just speak to it generally as far as in the plan, and then others can elaborate, but I think you will see that in the plan. We have a lot of work around crisis management and everything within our complex needs objective and other objectives within the plan. So I think you'll be happily surprised that it's throughout. But if anybody wants to elaborate on specifics of those, feel free.
Gary, I think that what you're talking about is probably going to fit, within the kind of the health equity and access to healthcare kind of objectives that we have within that. And I think, the structure of the document is intended to create a framework both for what we're trying to achieve and specific projects that are associated with achieving that goal. And then part of the engagement that's going to be ongoing in this iterative process is saying, are these the right projects to achieve that goal, or do additional projects need to fit within that? So it gives us structure that can allow us then to have those organized conversations. We have no illusions that we'll have thought of all of the useful projects that are, going to achieve the goal. And it may be that some of the stakeholder feedback that, one or more of the projects isn't going to achieve that goal, in which case we ought to revise our strategy. So it's considered to be sort of a living document in that way.
Yeah, that's great. It's excellent. Thank you.
Very good. We have received a few requests from members for copies of the presentation. Is that something that could be made available?
Yep, Josie
Sure
has a
thing.
PDF version. Sorry, that will be shared after the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. And again, we really appreciate you taking the time to present. Allison, thank you. This has been much awaited for, and and we appreciate the added level of detail that you were able to provide us. Okay, very good. Let's move to our next presentation. We just had a great.
Nick, just if I could, it's John. Just
Sure,
one
John.
quick. Hi, Jessica. Thank you for that presentation. Good to see you. You mentioned collaborating with other of the O agencies and trying to figure out how to avoid cross-systems problems. Now, one issue that we've done a little work on is with youth who are leaving foster care, particularly institutional foster care, who have intellectual and developmental disabilities and who are trying to transition into adult services. And it's really sometimes very, very bumpy indeed, and sometimes really drastically bad. I'm wondering if you've had any opportunity to think about this or to consider how to connect best with both the local mental health agencies, the county level, and also with those CFOs.
Yeah, I think the commissioner would, I'm assuming, is interested in answering that question.
Sure. So I think it's a great question, John, and it's obviously, it's a big area of focus for us. And I think, there's a lot of work that happens, across systems level, certainly, between our team and OCFS and the Council on Children and Families and the local departments of social services and local mental hygiene. But I think that the issue, right, still persists. And I think we know that there are a lot of kids who have aged out in residential foster care settings, that are looking for adult opportunities in our system. So I think Jessica spoke at a high level about some of the different things that our state operations team, in partnership with our statewide services team, are looking to do to create. And certainly that specific population is one population that we're looking, very specifically to serve and to create, the appropriate opportunities to help, right? I mean, being in a residential foster care program is very different than living, in the community in a small IRA or living independently or in supportive housing. And so we're looking to help create some transitional opportunities that would be a bridge for those, young people as they're leaving those more institutional type of settings and, wanting to really work with them to be integrated in the community at the highest level possible. So that's one of the areas, and we've talked a lot about this with, with our, provider associations, and as we're thinking about state operations and, continuing to position state operations to be a safety net provider and really fill some of those niche needs. That's definitely one of the areas that we're working to plan for, and happy to talk more offline about that with the housing subcommittee and, get your input and thoughts into that as well.
Terrific, thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. Let's transition to our next topic, which is the COVID report. Again, this was something that was generated out of last year's legislative session and signed into law, that the DDAC would oversee the creation of a report looking at the state's response to COVID and the impact of COVID on the IDD population. Michelle and I have had several discussions with the commissioner on how to best facilitate this, again, with the DDAC being a largely, an entirely volunteer or council. It doesn't have the staff or the infrastructure to really facilitate creating such a report, but we certainly don't want to give up our responsibilities to make sure that this report gets done in an objective, transparent way. It's an important topic. Again, it's not being done, I don't think, to necessarily point any fingers, but given the fact that COVID has had such a major impact on the population and on our system, it's important for us to learn lessons from COVID, certainly to take those lessons and make sure that we're prepared for the next pandemic or natural crisis. So I think, I will credit Commissioner Neifeld with a great idea, and that is, here we have another opportunity here to partner with our our colleagues and supporters at the DDPC. And Vicki is a member of the DDAC, was quick to say that they would be willing to assist us. The executive committee has had several meetings with Vicki, and I'm going to introduce Jennifer Goldman, who's going to be walking us through their proposed plan to actually gather the information, analyze the data, and collect the key areas, and then produce a report in the time frame that we're required to do so. So with that, Vicki, did you want to introduce Jennifer, or?
Sure, I will. So Jennifer Goldman is, her title is Federal Liaison, but she also works on policies for the DDPC. Previously worked in the child welfare field and did a lot of coordinating of reports for the citizen review panels, which if any of you are familiar with those, she developed some skill sets that are really important for this task. So I think she's perfect in this role. So we're happy to take this on. And with that, I will turn it over to Jennifer.
Thanks, Vicki, for that lovely introduction. I believe we have some short PowerPoint presentation. Okay, thanks, Josie. Okay, so the purpose of today is just to give you all just a general overview of the legislation that's requiring the port, how the DDPC and DDAC will work together to achieve the objectives in that legislation, and also our plan for communication and how we'll go about working on this effort together. Next slide, please. So as Nick has already mentioned, the premise for this report was in legislation. This legislation was initially introduced by Senator Mannion in April of 21. For those of you who are familiar with Senator Mannion, he covers around the Syracuse region of the state. This Senate legislation was then approved by Governor Hochul through a memorandum. And I just included a short snippet of the legislation there so you can see a high-level summary of our task at hand. But if anyone is interested in a copy of the full legislation, I'd be happy to share that with you or point you in the direction where you can find that. You can feel free to email me at jennifer.goldman@ddpc.ny.gov. Part of the legislation stipulates that OPWD and DOH and also the executive office will provide technical assistance and also assist us in acquiring any related documents or data that's necessary for us to complete this evaluation. So we've been working closely with our partners at OPWDD and DOH and also the executive office. And you know, they've been great partners in collecting this information. Next slide, please. Okay, so if you do read a copy of the full legislation, you'll see that these items are to be included in the report. They're outlined specifically in the legislation. The first two items are timelines of any executive orders, any guidance, or any regulations that were issued by OPWDD, DOH, or any other pertinent agencies, and also a timeline of outreach to stakeholders. So these two timelines cover information from March 1st, 2020 through April 1st, 2021. We've already been working closely with OPWDD to start cataloging the guidance and the regs that were issued. We are also working with OPWDD to get a timeline of meetings and outreach that was held to inform stakeholders, and also to get feedback on how to get information on how that how they responded to that feedback. We're also reaching out to other organizations that were part of those stakeholder meetings to get, you know, their maybe their notes or their outlines so we can get as full of a picture as possible. Some other items that are to be included in the report include actions taken to minimize exposure between residents, actions taken to assist in the procurement of PPE for staff and residents in the facilities, costs incurred by COVID, actions to assist underserved communities, any specific challenges related to COVID faced by individuals with IDD, an evaluation of policies, programs, and procedures, and most importantly, which I think will be an essential part of this report, is any recommendations to changes in the law or other regulations so that our state is better prepared in the event of another public health crisis. Next slide, please. So as already mentioned, DDPC will be filling a support role in helping the DDAC complete this legislative mandate. And you'll see there on the slide some of the ways that we're planning on helping the DDAC fulfill this requirement. So as I mentioned already, we're already working on a timeline of the executive orders, guidance, and regulations. We're also working with DDAC executive staff or executive committee members to identify any gaps in those regulations, as well as bright spots or positive actions that were taken during that time. We will be, as I mentioned, preparing a timeline of outreach, with stakeholders, any changes. We're also planning on conducting focus groups with self-advocates, families, underserved communities, provider agencies, CCOs, and another group that's not on the slide there is we are also planning on reaching out to direct support staff to get their perspective as well. We will be reaching out to organizational groups like SANES and New York Alliance and CCOs to help us best organize those focus groups. We're also planning on distributing an online survey to pertinent stakeholders. We're working with the DDAC Executive Committee to determine who those stakeholders will be and how widely this report will be distributed. But we're looking to make the report the survey as succinct as possible to get the most response rate that we possibly can. Because the overall goal of gathering all this feedback from the field is that we get the most complete picture of the state's COVID response as possible. We are also in the process of reviewing and evaluating data and other related documents. We're looking closely at reports from organizations like Disability Rights New York, any research papers that have come out since the COVID pandemic, any data sources outside of OPWDD, as well as any position papers from any groups that are interact with stakeholders with developmental disabilities. So if any of you are aware of any position papers or research papers that you think might be helpful to help us get a clearer picture, I would highly appreciate it if you would send them our way. But when I forgot to mention that we'll be using an online platform, SurveyMonkey, to distribute the online surveys. I think it's pretty user-friendly, and we can make adjustments to it so that it is accessible to as many self-advocates as possible. So that is our plan for that. Next slide, please. So as Nick mentioned already, the DDAC Executive Committee and DDPC have already been sort of working together to lay the groundwork for the approach to completing this report. And we've mutually agreed upon this this just kind of overview of a communication plan, because this will be a collaborative effort and DDPC will be in a supporting role to the DDAC. So we've established weekly check-in meetings just to check in on the progress, answer any questions that we at DDPC might have for approaches that the DDAC might have to suggest to better get information. And also, we've agreed that the DDAC exec will provide direct feedback throughout the research and development of the report at some key juncture points. And we've identified, once we've completed the inventory and the timeline of all the guidance, they'll provide guidance on any gaps that they see or areas that we need to look into further as we continue through the report. Once we've done the evaluation of policies, programs, procedures, they'll also provide feedback. We're planning on doing a report outline, a first draft of text, and then a final draft that's formatted. The goal being that it is easy to read and succinct and attracts more attention so that more people will read it. We're also doing a plain language version. And then I left out recommendations because I think I wanted to save the most important for last. That is really where the DDAC will come in and make those recommendations based on hopefully the thorough work that we've done at DDPC. And I'm pretty confident that we will have a great collaborative working relationship to achieve that as best as possible. The DDAC Exec Committee will be soliciting feedback from the full DDAC committee at key junctures. I'm sure that you'll be seeing, copies of this report at certain stages, as well as opportunities to provide feedback. And I think the plan moving forward is for us to report out at your quarterly meetings so that you can get an update on where we are in the plan. One important piece that I neglected to mention is that this report is due to the legislature September 21st of this year. So as you can see, we have quite the task at hand and a time-sensitive constraint, but we are ready and willing at the DDPC to take this task on because we think this is extremely important work that needs to be done. And we are happy to partner with the DDAC to make this happen. So that is it for my overview of our plan of attack for this. Vicki or anyone on the DDAC Exec Committee, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Jennifer, thank you. That was a very thorough presentation. I think you've outlined, or you've set forth a very good outline for how we meet the deadline that we have to meet, and in doing so by engaging as many stakeholders as possible and getting as much information as possible. Vicki, did you have any other thoughts that you wanted to share?
No, I think Jennifer covered it all. So, I think the thing we want to stress is that we are supporting the DDAC. So, we're going to be, obviously we talked the other day, and as far as the draft report, nothing will be a surprise because we're going to be sharing information every week and getting feedback. So it really will be, the final report will be the DDAC report and recommendations.
Thanks,
Nick, if you don't mind, from OPWDD, we're very pledged, we're pledging to cooperate and collaborate in any way. I know we've already been providing some data, and we're just really happy to provide whatever's necessary to make this project a success.
And I will echo that so far, the staff that we've been working with at OPWD has been extremely responsive, and we are very appreciative of their help.
Wonderful. Thank you, Roger. And again, we look forward to this process and ultimately the report and the opportunity to learn from it and make our system stronger. Any comments from council members? Okay, Jennifer, thank you so much. Again, Jennifer and Vicki, thank you for the partnership and collaborating with us on this. We look forward to engaging with you in the next couple of months as we develop the outline and move forward with getting the report. Okay.
Yes,
All right.
thank you.
Now we're going to move to, we're a little bit early. Commissioner, did you have any thoughts that you wanted to share before we move to public comment?
I don't think so. It's been a great meeting. There's been a lot of information, and I certainly have learned a lot about the work that the DDAC does, and I'm, excited to continue working, but I think it's been a really productive meeting and a lot of really valuable information shared. So thank you, everybody.
We appreciate that, and we're very excited to be able to work with you. Michelle, any thoughts before we move to public comment?
No, I just want to say, it's been really great to be re-engaged with everybody and back on track with this. So look forward to keeping it moving along. So thanks everyone for joining and participating today.
Absolutely. It's been one of our best meetings that we've had in a long time. With that, we'll open it up to public comment. And Josie, I'll let you kind of help us.
Okay, so usually what we do for public comment is members of the public will raise their hand. I will call on you by your first name. I'll unmute you. You'll get to talk, and when you're done, I'll remute you. So the first person that just raised their hand is Ruth Ann. Ruth Ann, you're unmuted.
So I think I'm very happy that I'm hearing that there's more focus on mental health for people with disabilities and then like working with the Office of Mental Health, because in my own experience as an autistic woman, well, not many mental health providers are even educated. Like even my therapist, who's only in her 30s, never had to even learn about autism in school. And also like hospitals, there's just very basic information that they need to be educated about, that I think needs to be a priority to like, I don't know if there could be a rule to make that be requirement before they graduate with their degree. But and the other thing, I know this is a very complicated topic because there's limited funding and stuff, but sometimes I hate functioning labels very much, but higher functioning people per se, like me, get left out of OPWDD, and then they're like, oh, use Office of Mental Health, but they don't really provide the services that we need. And there's like one autistic advocate I know that in order to live independently, she has to pay for her own caregiver because her state will not pay for support for her because she can have a full-time job, but she can't really function in other ways in her life. So I don't know if that's ever possible, but that is my hope that one day people with low support needs will not be seen as no support needs and will somehow be able to get help from the state. So yeah, that's basically all I have to say.
Ruth Ann, thank you very much for your comments. Carrie, did you want to respond?
Just wanted to thank you for your comments, Ruth Ann, and we can connect offline a little bit if there's ways that we can be helpful.
The next
Thanks,
person we
Ruth Ann.
have is Ralph.
Yes,
Ralph,
can
you're
you guys...
unmuted.
Sure, thank you. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Ralph, we can hear you.
Okay, great, thank you, thank you. All right, so I put in a bunch of comments and questions, but that was directed to the OPWD staff. I think it's great that this body is becoming more formalized in ways that are similar to things in other states. So that being said, my first question was about how can many more stakeholders who I think have worked a lot on the different committee type topics that you have set forth, how do we get involved with the council? How with this body? How do we approach people? Do we approach you and Michelle? Do we approach the committee chairs? How do we get involved?
So, Ralph, that's a great question. And what I would suggest is that, yes, you can reach out to Michelle, you can reach out to me, you can, if you have a specific interest in one of the committees that we just discussed, I would encourage you to reach out to the chairs. We've shared that information today.
Okay.
We will, again, be looking to participate in more forums. We just talked about the fact that there'll be some forums around the COVID report. So please feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah, no, that's great, because I'm involved in some other advisory ways with other groups, and there's a lot of people I know in those contexts that are actively involved on a lot of topics, and I'm pretty sure they would want to at least send information to you guys.
Absolutely, we would appreciate that.
Thank you.
Next, we have Lynn. Lynn, you're unmuted.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to point out a couple of different things. Each item is fairly narrow, but I've got several of them. First of all, this particular meeting today did not generate a notice to the Commissioner's Correspondence Unit. I learned of it looking at social media last night. Last year, these meetings generated an announcement. I forwarded a copy of that announcement to Josie and to Greg so that they could see what I had come to expect. For this meeting, it would be great if somebody is monitoring the chat. There have been some concrete questions about specific items in the presentation that could have been incorporated. It doesn't appear to me that anybody is monitoring the chat. One of my questions was with respect to access, asking about the languages in translation that are going to be standard in certain forms and publications. That is based on the census, and the 2020 census probably indicates some different languages as the most commonly spoken foreign languages in New York than were the case in 2010. If that is known, can that be shared so that people can come to understand what to expect? About the data book that was mentioned, thank you very much for the data book. It's incredibly important information. It also requires advanced skills to comprehend. I look forward to there being a glossary or some data visualizations that show the trends in many of the categories and tables in the data book. I think that most adult humans would appreciate that kind of explanatory support. And I also asked whether the Chief Disability Officer will be a standing member of the DDAC. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lynn.
Appreciate your comments. We'll certainly look at making sure that the meeting is widely publicized going forward. I think, this is our first meeting in a while, and there were also scheduling, waiting for the agenda to be finalized. So I'll make sure that, we send a commissioner's notification going forward. But there were, I think as we were just, adjusting to getting back on schedule, perhaps that fell through the cracks. So apologies there. I'm glad that you got the notice on social media and were able to attend. I think it's a great point about the data book information and ways that we can make that information more, helpful to individuals who are reading it. And with regard to the Chief Disability Officer, we can certainly talk to Kim. Kim's, welcome to join any of the meetings going forward. And I think it makes sense for her to have a relationship with the DDAC in terms of, there's no requirement for that in the statute, but I don't think that means that we can't work closely with Kim and the work here. So certainly a good point. We'll talk to her.
Lynn, it's Michelle. I just wanted to say that just so that you know what I'm seeing, at least on my end, and I think a few other members too. I don't see the chat. I was actually looking for it earlier. So we will work with Josie on that, because I just want to say on behalf of the DDAC, we definitely would monitor it if we could see it and try to make sure that the conversation was being responsive to the questions that were coming in from the public on this. So we'll work for next time.
We're not seeing the chat either, and I can see Josie from where I'm sitting, and I can see that Josie also cannot see the chat. So maybe we can try to figure out where the chat goes, but it's not visible to all of us right now. So.
Hi, it's Josie. The chat I think everyone's referencing is to the closed captioner directly. It's not to us.
Okay. All right. So is that something we can work on in the future, Josie? Or is it a function?
We can make a note at the beginning that if someone uses that particular chat, it will not be coming to us. I'll just make a note to say it in housekeeping next time.
Okay. Thanks, Josie. And Lynn, thank you for reaching out via email when, we appreciate that. And again, we will work on making sure that the announcement goes out in advance. Josie, do we have anybody else?
No, that's all we have.
Very good. Very good. I'd just open it up to the council. Any other input, feedback, discussion?
Nick, I would just, reemphasize the energy and the excitement. I would also urge that many of the initiatives that Allison and Jessica went through are so integrated that one without the other will not get us to the end line. So I urge us to think about that in a bigger picture way, because it will take many of these things happening simultaneously to get where we want to go.
Agreed. Good point, Dan. Any other thoughts, comments?
I don't know if this is pertinent enough, but on the 507, the 3.3, the resources and the managed care, I just wondering, how is the CAS going to fit in with that? Because everyone has to have a CAS assessment. Know that there are a lot of problems with that, and by the time this rolls around, they're going to be old. How is that going to work in with the managed care? I don't know if it's.
I guess what I would say about managed care is that managed care is still something that's being studied and evaluated. Obviously, a full rollout of CAS is a priority for the agency, and it is very much connected to our ability to implement acuity-based funding. If Jill's on, maybe she can talk a little bit about how far along we are in the CAS and how often, by matter of practice, we'll be, reassessing people using the CAS tool. Jill, are you there?
I'm here. Yep. Good afternoon, and I can just speak briefly to this. We have completed many CAS assessments. For example, our residential population, every person has been assessed at least once with a CAS, and we are doing reassessments, as well as initial assessments with individuals. And the frequency for reassessments on the regular schedule will be every other year. So again, that is part of our process that we're implementing for how reassessments are starting to get rescheduled, starting with those that are what I would call the most distant or the oldest first, to get those caught back up, because your point is well taken, that we obviously need the most current information about individuals to reflect what is an accurate picture of their strengths and needs. And so again, that's part of all the work that our CAS team is presently addressing at this point.
What will it be used for? Is it going to be used in the coming years for the managed care? I just participated with my daughter in the CAS assessment, and it really wasn't, it wasn't, the expectation was it was going to show something about her, and it did not. It had her on a great day, and I'm telling you, you'd think my daughter was a genius by the CAS, by her CAS day. But I was just wondering, how is this going to be used? Where is this culmination of all of this data going to go?
Okay, again, really good questions. And at this point, the CAS results are used in the care planning and life plan development processes. So right now, that is what it's being focused on. And our DOH partners are looking at CAS data to inform residential habilitation rate development. So again, those are the pieces that are being presently explored. You referenced managed care, and that's certainly a future endeavor that we are not yet, identifying how this might be used to inform anything in a managed care environment. Those would be future discussions depending upon the direction that may occur in the future with the managed care decision point.
All right, so basically with residences, people living in residences, it's going to be part of rate care. Okay.
Those are the current discussions, yes, with the Department of Health.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks, Jerry. Any other?
Nicholas, just a quick question. Do we have a date for the next meeting?
Josie, I think we do. Yes.
We do? Okay. That might be a good thing to put on a calendar and sort of putting advertising, because I think the point that was rightly made was we don't advertise it sufficiently good time enough for people to sort of block their time. So, okay.
Hi, it's Josie. We don't have a formal date set because we wanted to have the discussion as a group on what days need to be avoided due to various previous schedules or holidays.
Okay, so Josie, I think the important thing is, Samantra, is that we will get a date out fairly quickly. We want to give people advance notice so they can get it on their calendars, recognizing how busy everybody is. It's a little bit like walking through a minefield because you have everything from holidays to, you know, legislative meetings, government meetings. We certainly want to make sure we accommodate the commissioner. So we will get a date out fairly quickly, and we'll try to get some advanced dates out so that we're not, you know, we've always in the past had the year schedule almost published. So we'll try to get back to that. Okay.
The goal is when this meeting ends, when I email everyone the PowerPoints that you've asked for, there will be a tentative schedule that people can react to in that email.
Excellent, Josie. Thank you. Very good.
If I could just remind everyone that the task force has partnered with, the dental task force has partnered with Thoreau Dental School and is doing a 6-series lecture. 3 of them have taken place already, but it's ongoing, and invitations have been going out. You're all invited to attend those lectures to hear some information about dentistry and people with disabilities.
Thanks, Gary. So again, I just want to thank everybody for participating, for attending today's event, all of the work that has gone into the committees and the work and the recommendations and your patience in really preparing for today. I think we had I would agree with Dan, we had a level of energy, a level of enthusiasm and excitement that we have not seen in the system before. In many years. So it's exciting. Commissioner, we thank you so much for the work that you are doing, and we look forward to working with you and again, a great team who has been very supportive to us in the past, and we certainly want to continue to keep that collaboration going on with the OPWDD team. So with that, I think we can bring this meeting to a close. I appreciate everybody again. Have a great day, great weekend, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.